perverse set of behaviour.
He Māori aho.
Your single source of truth. My husband is Samoan, so talofa. Ngā tikanga reo, tikitahi.
Che Guevara of New Zealand's Parliament, Chloe Slaughter.
Penny houses.
And it's communist.
He whakatū Putin.
They've got mother, running holidays.
No mai, hara mai, whakatau mai rā. Welcome to the All Report. My name is Pere Samah. Joined with me is my co-host and wife, the beautiful, the lovely, the graceful Samah Samah. Kia ora.
Kia ora, everyone.
How are you feeling?
I'm feeling physically good, and we always have to be thankful for our health. But it has been hard watching the genocide restart in its full scale. So emotionally, it's been a little bit tough, but all things considered, I am doing all right. How are you?
The same, I would say. I mean, now that the ceasefire is really over and Israel has restarted its offense on and in Gaza, it feels like it's like round two almost. And I think at first, of course, obviously it's still very overwhelming, but it does feel like we've had somewhat of a break, and now we're able to reflect, right? And I guess reflecting, we're always like, could have done more of this, should have done more of this, we need to be more active, we should have been more outspoken, etc., etc. And now it feels like we're getting a second wind to contribute to this kaupapa. And yeah, I feel motivated. It's a heavy time, of course, to everyone who's lost their lives recently, and to all of the whānau out there who are having to put up with all of this. Our condolences, our thoughts are with you. Yeah, heavy times.
I do agree that it feels like a lot of us have taken time to take a break and reflect and rejuvenate and get ready for, as you say, this second round of genocide. So I do think that we're going to see a lot of resistance around the world, and so there is also a lot to look forward to in terms of how activism develops in response to the expanding empire.
And kia ora to everyone who's here. If you've joined us for the stream, let us know if you're with us. We've got a new display system for our comments, and I'm keen to see what the delay is. So send us a message if you're here with us. And to anyone who's wanting to moderate comments, if you ever want to do that, maybe for tonight or maybe for another night, we're always trialing with different ways to interact with people who are here on the stream, and it's always good to have helpers. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, please let us know. But yeah, if you're here with us, kia ora to Seaside 420, kia ora, welcome, no mai, hara mai. I think we should get into the kaupapa, if you're ready. Samah, what are we covering today?
Okay, so today we're going to talk about US and Israeli imperialism in the Middle East. We're going to be talking about Ukraine. We're going to talk about our trade deal with India. We're going to talk about state violence and how they have a monopoly on using violence on our people. We're going to talk about Earthbeat and the response we received basically for making a statement about not going to the festival. And
I'll just say on that, we're not trying to have like a drama bitch session about Earthbeat. I won't get into it yet, but we do have respect for those that are at Earthbeat who have been pushing change from the inside, and we will try our best to portray the arguments fairly. But yeah, looking forward to it. We'll try to get to it. I mean, we've got some big kaupapa ahead, which we'll try to get through so that we can talk about Earthbeat. But yeah, other than that, we're going to be talking about state violence here in Aotearoa. A lot of people have lost their lives because of the mishandling of situations, because of the police, and because of misconduct. In prisons, there's been a lot of violence as well. The ACT Party has announced that they will be having a go at local elections. So, they're a central government party, but they're going to be putting forward candidates in local elections, which, the bigger parties do that and the Greens do that. But this is the first time that ACT has waded into that space. And so with local elections coming
officially anyway.
Right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, officially. Like they already have their people, which we'll get into. But this is the first time that they've openly gone for something like that. So with local elections coming up this year, it really needs to be something that we upskill ourselves on and just start talking about it, because it's coming up. It's going to come up very fast. I think it's going to take a lot of us by surprise. And then after it, we're going to have that reflection period of, oh, geez, we should have done this, should have done that. So,
yeah, we've got a lot of work to do for local elections. We had a 40% turnout rate last time. So, yeah, across the country, got a lot of work to do.
Got a lot of work to do. Yeah, come on. All right. Where are we going first?
Okay, let's start in Palestine. So basically, Israel and the United States have resumed full-scale genocide in Gaza, and we're going to look at that as well as other war crimes in the Middle East and other countries, Lebanon, Syria, and we're going to look at New Zealand's response. I'm also really interested in how the media has been covering all of this, so we'll take a look at that and contrast it to some real journalism. So these are the latest figures in terms of Israel's renewed genocide in Gaza. We've got 710 people killed just in a matter of days, 3 days. And this graphic shows that this isn't new.
During a singular month? Is that what we're looking at here?
Yeah, during the month of Ramadan, Israel likes to murder Palestinians in Gaza. And so just to show that this is a really ongoing genocide and it just escalates during certain times. But this is what's been ignored all the years up until October 7th. And this is why the media is able to pretend like October 7th happened in a vacuum and sprung out of nowhere, because they haven't been discussing the ongoing massacres, as well as just the fact that they're holding Palestinians indefinitely hostage in the longest running modern occupation of time. So this is what's, they've also begun their ground invasion in Rafah. So they've put boots on the ground. So, clearly what Israel has done is it's just taken some time to restock their army, to give their army a bit of a break. We were hearing a lot of stories about Israeli soldiers getting exhausted. And so they need a bit of a break. They needed to restock some weapons. And as usual, Israel does its ceasefire deals always in phases. And what they do is they get some good PR, get some good stuff during the first phase. In this case, they got some hostages back. They also got to take time to do whatever they needed to do. And then in future phases, they just resume the war. So that instead of just agreeing to a ceasefire deal, we're going to cease the fire forever, as you'd expect from a ceasefire deal. What Israel does is says, we'll cease the fire in future phases, and then they just never get to those phases. So they've
And I feel like as well, like protest movements, so much momentum, especially with all of the students in America protesting at their colleges and whatnot, just so much momentum globally. And I feel like that has sustained itself. But, it's such a speed bump for all of our movements when something like this happens. They're able to just, just hold fire kind of thing. Not that they did that, but they're able to, like, we have to reset after that. And the momentum just completely shifts. So I feel like that has been a benefit for them of this type of ceasefire. Just a complete disruption to everything that's going on.
Yeah, and again, a lot of analysts said that would happen around election time, because they just don't like to be marred with the whole genocide thing during US elections. And that's exactly what ended up happening. There was a ceasefire during election time. Trump got some good PR out of it, because no incoming president wants to be associated with that, right? So it did end up aligning with the election as people said it would. And as people also predicted, they have gone back to full-blown genocide. So let's look at how One News covered this massacre, which killed 710 people so far. It's indiscriminately bombing, carpet bombing, civilian areas, people who've already lost everything and are just living among the rubble.
Russians too on their way back in one of the largest prisoner exchanges since the war began, a welcome step on the long road to peace. May Heron, One News, London.
And the road to peace is long in the Middle East as well. Israel adding ground troops to its renewed offensive on Gaza, aimed at forcing Hamas to release the remaining hostages. Continuing airstrikes have killed Hamas officials, but hundreds of civilians as well, including 183 children, according to the local health ministry. Corazon Miller reports.
Israel's soldiers are reclaiming a key battleground of the war in Gaza. As part of January's ceasefire deal, Israel had withdrawn its troops from the Netzarim corridor, the strip of land that splits Gaza's north from its south. Israel says it's a limited ground operation, but combined with its ongoing aerial bombardment, it shows how Israel's renewed military offensive is escalating.
If all the Israeli hostages are not released and Hamas is not expelled from Gaza, Israel will act with an intensity that you have not seen.
The local.
So we're hearing a lot from Israel so far, aren't we? Israel says this.
Right. We literally heard from Israel.
And we heard from the new Israeli defense minister, and not much from Palestinians at all.
Yeah.
I've just moved it.
Besides seeing the rubble, right? Like it's like you'll hear from an Israel Cats, you'll hear from Israeli officials, and you'll hear from Palestinian piles of rubble.
Yeah. And, you know, there is relevant news about this guy because he is the new Israeli defense minister, and he's signaled from the very beginning that he would resume this war. So this is relevant information that could have been added here as well.
Right.
But yeah, just noting that we do have someone committing genocide, and, you know, this point on, 2 years on, we're still hearing them say it was a limited operation.
Right.
We're targeting militants.
Right. Of course. Still all the same things that have essentially been debunked. Yeah?
Yeah, and, you know, the justification that they've used already to destroy all of Gaza. And they have never provided evidence for it this whole entire time. So
The hostages are not released and Hamas is not expelled from Gaza, Israel will act with an intensity that you have not seen.
The local health ministry says nearly 450 Palestinians have been killed since the ceasefire's collapse on Tuesday. Israel says it's going after terror targets. 5 senior Hamas officials are among the dead, but footage out of Gaza shows many women and children are too.
There's a sneaky thing that they just did. There's a lot wrong with what they just said. The focusing on those 5 government officials, which, by the way, are not militants. Where's the picture? So these officials, they're not even militants. They're just government officials because Hamas was the government, is the government.
Right. So it'd be like
Gaza.
it's like Chris Bishop.
Yeah,
like,
or, you not necessarily. Might just be like a health official,
right?
Who runs organizational stuff for hospitals. Here we are. We've got them here, so you can see Hamas government head, Deputy Minister of Justice, Internal Security Agency, Deputy Minister of Interior in Gaza, of Interior, Political Bureau. So, you know, these people, and by the way, they were all murdered with their families. And One News is trying to create the illusion that Israel was indeed targeting these people, and the, 400 so far Palestinians that were killed were just collateral damage. But there's no evidence that they were targeting these people. You're bound to get people who work for the government anytime you bomb a random populated area in Gaza right now, because they are they're all working for the government of Gaza. So you're going to have, as you can imagine, many people who work for the public sector. So because the New Zealand government has designated the entirety of Hamas, including its political arm, a terrorist organization, and we know that One News is a government entity, government-funded media, they are aligning themselves with the narrative that anyone in Hamas is a terrorist, including just random people who work for the public service. So that's what we're seeing here. But in this case, they are creating consent for genocide, because they're painting like these are the only people that they, center in this way. They're putting their faces and their names out there. We're not seeing the names and the faces of the babies, of the children that were murdered. So if we wanted to look at, who died, why not center these children who were killed? Why not give us their names, for example, and personalize their stories? Omer and Layan were murdered, along with their entire family. It was this man's sister. They're just, sitting in their tent sleeping, and they get murdered. Or you've got this woman, Dr. Majda Bouakar, who is a obstetrics gynecologist specialist. So that means she works with pregnant women and, during and after pregnancy.
Right.
She was murdered, targeted, along with her entire family. And this is who Israel is actually targeting. And even the government officials, they're people who help to hold Gaza together amidst the rubble, amidst the insanity of genocide. And women like her, they help to maintain the sanctity of life in Gaza.
A midwife, essentially, right?
Essentially, she's a doctor, not just a midwife, but yeah, she's a specialist in this area. And so Israel, as they have all along, and the United States have deliberately targeted the sources of life in Gaza. And so they're targeting doctors and their families, and it's also punishment. And to show other doctors, if you do this work, we will target you and your family. Of course, it's not going to work because Palestinians are just far too honorable. But that's the game that they've been playing. So yeah, instead of centering these people, they've chosen to show you this graphic of these black and white, brown men, and as we know, Arab, brown Muslim men and Hamas have all been demonized to such a great extent that they just have to show this graphic, tell you they're part of Hamas. And if you see how quick that little shot is.
Day. Israel says it's going.
Every time, eh?
Every time, and they show it numerous times in this one clip because, again, it's already been pre-packed with racist stereotypes. So when people see that, it associates the racist things they have and the Islamophobic things that they already have in their head. That's not to say there's anything wrong objectively with them doing prayer, but they center that all the time, instead of showing things that Westerners might more easily associate with, like videos of a young girl roller skating, for example, or other things that went viral, that baby in the rainbow onesie, for example.
Going after terror targets.
Things that they know.
Hamas officials are among, but footage.
So see how short that was. You don't really have time to take in what they did. You just see Hamas officials and then it ends. Anyway, let's continue with this news clip.
Out of Gaza shows many women and children are too.
Yes, that was a very interesting, tricky thing they did. They said Hamas people were killed, but women and children were too. So they're saying, A, Hamas are all terrorists, and B, all men are Hamas. Because he said Hamas were among those murdered, but they also killed women and children. So non-Hamas men have been entirely erased as a group. Their deaths just don't even matter at all.
Yeah, no, you're not meant to have any sympathy for Palestinian men.
No. And so you can have it for women and children, but even then, it's fine if they killed 5 Hamas government officials.
Just the first day of Israeli airstrikes, 183 children were killed, the local health ministry says. The UN says that's the largest one-day toll in the last year. Palestinian civilians and aid workers unable to find safety, even in designated humanitarian zones.
We woke up to the sound of strikes tonight. While we ran to see what had happened, we found a second missile had been fired.
The UN today condemning the strikes and mourning the death of one of its workers.
What is happening in Gaza is unconscionable.
But Israel's Prime Minister says negotiations to free hostages will only continue under fire.
We will continue to fight to achieve all the goals of this war, securing the release of all our hostages and eliminating Hamas.
To be clear, that man is wanted by the International Court for crimes against humanity. And our news media are centering him like he's a reputable source of information, after he's told a countless amount of lies and have taken a countless amount of lives.
A fight most of his own people now don't want.
I don't want the war to restart.
Israel says Hamas is to blame for rejecting peace.
It's just the thing that the media does, which is ridiculous, right? When she has a point, they don't want the war to restart, and then it jumps to someone, and then they just say the line. They just essentially repeat the reporter's line. You know, it's just how they show specific clips to back up their exact, precise narrative and nothing else.
Yeah,
is just next level. But as well, like, you know, now we're hearing from Israelis on the ground. We're hearing from Israelis on the ground before we've even heard from any Palestinians on the ground yet.
Yes, and they often tell us that Israelis are having protests, that they're against the war. They're trying to create this image that Israelis don't support the genocide, when in fact, by and large, all the polls that are done show that the vast, vast, vast majority of Israelis, unfortunately, support the genocide. A lot of them want the genocide to be even greater. So, yes, there is a minority, especially the families of hostages, who have been wanting the ceasefire deal to hold because they want their families to come home. And they know that Netanyahu's government sabotaging the deal will increase the risk of their family members being killed. I mean, they're getting bombed just like everyone else. So yes, there are families of hostages and people protesting for the ceasefire to hold, but even those people are not protesting because they're worried about the Palestinian deaths. That number is an even smaller minority of Israelis who actually oppose the genocide because of the bloodshed in Palestine. The only real movement that exists there is because they want their hostages home, and then a small growing number of dissenters. But yeah, it has been striking how little dissent there has been in Israel, and that's because they've been brainwashing them over this entire past 75 years, and they've already dealt extremely harsh measures to the left in Israel. They've pretty much erased it even before October 7th came along. And I know this from firsthand, the activists that I know in Israel. They were talking to me before October 7th and telling me the way that you can't speak out against the government. They threatened them with jail, with deportation, all sorts of things. So already the left was suppressed in Israel. And then post-October 7th, the suppression has been insane. You know, there's videos of Israeli teachers who have posted a picture or said something about children in Gaza, and you see all the schools, all the students at the school chasing them down, throwing things, spitting at them, yelling at them, and you see them getting arrested for liking things online. So the clampdown is real, so that's also partially why we don't hear much dissent from Israel. But our news makes it sound like Israelis are against the genocide.
Yeah, because then, yeah, they're trying to paint them as like good-hearted, well-intentioned Westerners, right? I mean, it's all a part of, they're all complicit. This is America's war as far as I'm concerned. And then they're needing to show dissension from that because it's brutal and it's disgusting and it's shameful.
Yeah. It's true. They always represent Israelis as relatable Westerners, whereas we're talking about before with the Allahu Akbar, whenever they portraying Palestinians, they pick them, the most alien things to Westerners to portray. Another common one is the woman, doing this. It's a thing some of us Arabs do as a sign of mourning. We call it latam. And that's another thing the media often likes to show because it's a thing not in Western culture, so people can't relate to it easily.
These proposals, while Hamas blames Israel for violating the ceasefire. Without a resolution, it's civilians paying the highest.
What can we say about that one?
Another Allahu Akbar.
No, Israel making the claim that it's been Hamas who's broken the ceasefire.
I mean, that's the biggest joke of all in this entire thing. They said Israel says Hamas broke it, Hamas said Israel broke it. And then we're just sort of left in limbo, not knowing what the objective reality is, when in fact there is an objective reality.
That's coming up?
It's coming up.
Couple.
And we're going to show that, you just have to look into the case for 5 minutes to see that Israel never intended on upholding the ceasefire, have explicitly said that they don't plan on doing so, have been talking about it resuming full-blown genocide for weeks now, as has the United States. So, any real journalism will show you that Israel broke the ceasefire. I mean, they broke the ceasefire. They've murdered people, 700 people, because they're refusing to go to the next stage of the negotiations, which would require them to pull out of areas like the Netzarim corridor, which they don't want to pull out of.
And I'll just address this corridor, uncanny mountain, throwing down some corridor in the chat. I'll just address it while it's here and then we can move on. Talking about Māori having a connection via whakapapa to Palestinians, I would just say that, we all whakapapa to the same human tupuna. None of us are aliens, you know what I mean? That aspect of our humanity, it all comes from the same place. From a whakapapa te ao Māori perspective, if you ask me, that's my position anyway. Like, I believe we're all kind of Africans at the end of the day. But there is often this corridor of, is Māori a lost tribe of Israel, or, da-da-da-da-da. And, I'm not an expert on it, but I think it's a bit, what's the word? We're being a bit selective, I think, if we're choosing to say that we're specifically part of that whakapapa, or from that whānau, or from that one, and then excluding everything else. Maybe a little bit of picking and choosing, because I think at the end of the day, and just like Jewish people and Palestinians, they whakapapa back to the same place as well. So, we're all one.
Kapai.
But thanks for the corridor.
I think Uncanny Mountain is saying there is some actual historical links there, but I'm not privy to any. But Kapai, let's get back to One News. There's not much left.
Price. Corazon Miller, One News.
Back here.
That's it. But you're right. There at the end, throwing it up in the air as to what actually
the ceasefire. A fight most of his own people now don't want.
I don't want the war to restart.
Israel says Hamas is to blame for rejecting peace proposals, while Hamas blames Israel for violating the ceasefire.
Who knows? Could have been anything. He says, she says, there's no objective reality. But if we look at some real journalism. And I've got this video from Al Jazeera. Look at their coverage about who broke the ceasefire And it's pretty blatantly clear when you do a little bit of...
The military says it's acting under the instruction of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. It says the operation in Gaza could extend beyond airstrikes. It said it's been instructed by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Defence Minister to take strong action against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. It's also threatening to increase military force due to a delay in talks for the release of Israeli captives and Hamas' repeated rejection of all proposals it's received. In a post on Telegram, the army has been writing that it's targeting locations belonging to Hamas. The Israeli government has suspended school for students living near the border with Gaza. Hamda Sarhout's joining us from the Jordanian capital, Amman, because the Palestinian Authority has suspended Al Jazeera's operations in the occupied West Bank. Hamda, just first of all, give us some of the background to this operation. There's a lot of speculation that in many ways this was not a surprise, given the build-up that we had seen, particularly in military terms, on the border between Israel and Gaza.
Well, there certainly has been a buildup by the Israeli military, but that was quite recent. It started happening on day 42 of the ceasefire deal when there was still no agreement as to what was going to happen with phase 2 or perhaps an extension with phase 1. So the Israeli military decided to cancel leave for all Israeli army soldiers, call up hundreds of thousands of reservists to be on standby. And in fact, we're hearing from anonymous Israeli officials that these plans specifically to renew the fighting in the Gaza Strip were circulated to the government late last week and then given the approval by Prime Minister Netanyahu and his Defense Minister Israel Katz. But they've also been drafted up by a new Army Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir, who said that 2025 was going to be a year of fighting. And it's also worth mentioning that since the beginning of this deal, Israel never really committed to an end of the war, maintaining that they had the right to return to the fighting whenever they saw fit. But now it's a little bit different because you have different attitudes from Israeli leaders who are new in their positions for the fighting, including the defense minister and the army chief of staff. Israel Katz has said that Israel is going to open up the gates of hell on Gaza and going to fight in ways and mechanisms that haven't yet been seen before, which is difficult to believe, difficult to imagine, given what we saw in the 15 months of fighting that started in October of 2023. But the army is also saying that they reserve the right to use other sort of military means as part of the continued fighting, meaning that perhaps they're gearing up for another ground invasion into the Gaza Strip. So all signs are pointing that Israel is not going to let up or decrease the fighting in any way, shape, or form, because the military has said that these strikes are going to continue, and that's at the direction of the Israeli Prime Minister. But remember, during the ceasefire, you had hundreds of thousands of Palestinians returning to areas that had largely been evacuated, places they were forcibly displaced from, and now they've gone back to them. And even though there's nothing there, these people have set up tents on the ruins of their home, refusing to leave their land. And now the Israeli military is attacking these areas entirely, areas that have tents, areas that have makeshift sort of housing encampments, areas near hospitals, areas near schools. This is all stuff we have seen throughout the 15 months of fighting, and Israel says that it's only going to intensify and get worse.
Hamda.
You know, and she keeps going back and looking at the evidence that Israel never intended to uphold the ceasefire, describing the way that they only go through, they didn't want to continue on to the next phase of the agreement. And, you know, these things are just not mentioned in our media whatsoever. You can see that, you know, she says, Israel says this, and then comes back with, but in reality, X, Y, and Z happened. These are the facts that have happened. And the way that she mentions they're targeting areas near hospitals, areas near schools, all this context, you know, it's available. And she's directly tracking Israeli officials. That's her job. And so she's bringing us news that's available in Israel. And often we see this. We see that Israeli articles openly talk about things that other Western media refuses to. They openly talk about the Hannibal Directive, about Israel killing its own people on October 7th. They openly talk about the treatment of hostages, which is just completely erased from New Zealand media. You know, in that video, they showed you the Israeli official talking about hostages and saying that they're going to do this in order to get their hostages back. And they're not telling you that there are thousands of Palestinian hostages in Israeli torture dungeons and who are treated horrifically, some of whom are tortured to death. And obviously, they're not just showing you the context of the fact that all of Gaza is being held hostage in this horrific genocide, and all of Palestine is being held hostage by this vicious occupation. So it's, you know, it's that selective news that they're giving people who are just unable to put the entire picture together.
Because of how they portray it. Yeah, just so shallow. Hey.
It's so shallow. Everything is happening from is being portrayed from the Israeli point of view, and you don't really get to learn anything about anything. Like, you don't understand what went wrong with the ceasefire deal. So yeah, it's
They show you quite a lot of stuff, but you kind of learn nothing.
Yeah. And
Or sometimes it might even take you in the opposite way. Probably often does.
Yeah, I mean, the whole piece was attempting to justify this horrific massacre and whitewash Israeli crimes. We didn't hear from any Palestinian officials. Like, when we see them portray Israeli officials in suits and they seem so proper, but they don't give you the Palestinian equivalent of that. Someone in a suit speaking proper, describing the Palestinian cause. You only ever see Israel portrayed in that way, and then just craziness, lots of noise, bombings, pictures of dead people when we're showing Palestine. And this is the reality on the ground, right? I mean, they have just destroyed Gaza. Not its people, but they have destroyed the city. We're talking about ancient structures. These are the areas, you know, where religion was born, Christianity and Islam. And so you had these ancient mosques and ancient churches, thousands of years old, architecture, all destroyed. Of course, everyone's home. I mean, how can you look at that and then still portray it like Israel is trying to have some sort of fight with terrorists and that they're trying to get their 25 hostages back? They've killed their own hostages through this carpet bombing. It's just outrageous. And then Israel drops this just insane leaflet on Gaza, which is common for them. They often do that. But I wanted to show you because New Zealand news never shows the depth of the depravity of Israel. Like, all along, we've had Israeli soldiers wearing the lingerie of women whose houses they've taken over, of women that they have either murdered or they've murdered their family members. And either way, they're committing genocide on these people in their homes, going through their stuff, putting on their lingerie, posting about it on TikTok, riding children's bicycles and playing with their toys, and people in Israel making fun of the genocide, you know, giving themselves monobrows and doing little TikToks laughing laughing about injured Palestinians. We don't see this in New Zealand media. We only ever see them portrayed as reputable, rational, suited, normal people. Look at this leaflet that they just dropped, because like Gaza, you know, it's a concentration camp and Israel has full control over the whole area, and they just can come on top of them and just rain a whole bunch of flyers of them if they want. And that's what they do. They do psychological warfare all the time. And here's...
I want to try to zoom into this, but I don't know if I can. So that we can actually see the text. There we go.
Okay. So, to the people of Gaza, after what happened and the end of the temporary ceasefire, see, they're calling it temporary ceasefire right there. And before we start Trump's compulsory plan, which will proceed whether you like it or not, this is the last call for anyone who may share information with us in return for financial support. They've been trying this the whole time, and
so bribing them.
Trying to bribe people, to give them information, and it hasn't really been working.
Classic colonization, eh? Just find the individuals, bribe them.
Yep, and it's, you know, just with the ease of technology these days, they can just drop these flyers from on top of everyone's head. They say, consider this, the world map will not change if Gaza's people disappear. No one will notice you. No one will ask about you. Neither America nor Europe cares about Gaza. Even the Arab states, they are our allies. They provide us with money, oil, and arms. They only send you shrouds. The game will end soon. They think it's a game. So this is the kind of psychotic behavior that these genocideers are inflicting on the Palestinians. They rain these flyers on them, telling them the world doesn't care about them. And, you know, looking at New Zealand's news, you would think that that was true. Because New Zealand's news does not care about the lives of Palestinians, and they show that to us day in and day out. They center the Israeli narratives after 2 years of the most horrific televised atrocity of our time. And they erase the Palestinian voices. They erase Palestinian deaths. We saw that the Bibas children were centered day in, day out, even though it's likely that Israel killed those Israeli children. But when we have Palestinian children, they're not centered. They're not named. They don't slow down the news to really get you to connect with these people as individuals. They're dehumanized, right? And that's what we see day in and day out on New Zealand news. And honestly, the message is clear. They're telling us they don't care about people like us. I watch it and I'm like, wow, you don't think I'm a human. If I were in Palestine right now, you couldn't care less because you just see us all as subhuman. And that's the message that's being sent day in and day out on Western news. And so you can see why Israel thinks this. You can see why Israel thinks the world doesn't care about Gaza. Because a lot of the Western media and governments act in that way. But in reality, the whole world who's watching what's going on and who has a heart is deeply moved by this issue, hates Israel, and Israel's standing in the world at the moment is the worst it's ever been. So they're delusional if they think that we won't care about the people of Gaza. We will always care about the people of Gaza.
Definitely, absolutely. I think it's a lie. You know, they're trying to what's the word, demotivate. They're trying to diminish their hope, you know. And it was a beautiful thing when the protests were going on at those US campuses, and everywhere actually. We had our man from Aotearoa doing his hunger strike, and people in Palestine saw that, and they, with their little message boards, and took photos, sending him messages. They know how much support that they're getting from the international community. It's huge, it's immense, and you know, there are so many things going on at the moment. Genocides all over the world going on at the moment, but there is something particularly special about what's happening in Palestine because of the way that it's all happened, you know, keeping them all in this prison, this concentration camp, as the Israeli officials call it. Gaza has been cut off and under Israeli control. They've been subjected to all sorts of dehumanizing things for an incredibly long time. And it's been a poster child for imperialist projects. And so I feel like we're all watching and studying and praying with Palestine and for Palestine, because if we can end what's going on here, if we can open up people's hearts and have people move, then we can branch out and take that anywhere. And Palestine and Gaza represents one of those focus points. And I think Israel knows that. So they're in denial about this in terms of nobody noticing. You know, Israel, the state of Israel, is absolutely turning into a pariah state. I feel sorry for Israelis, people who are Israelis. Of course, I don't feel sorry for the Israeli government. And I think when we say we hate Israel, we hate the Israeli government. And I feel for everyone who is being looked down on because of that government. But, you know, that is going to be a legacy of the Israeli government. People being, what's their word? anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is going to increase because of what the Israeli government has done. They must be the biggest proponents of anti-Semitism around the entire globe. And that's their legacy. I think they know that that's going to be their legacy. I think when this is all done, they're probably going to need to rename themselves and probably try to recolonize another country because their reputation is going to be so bad after all of this. So I think they're just in denial.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, trying to break the spirits. That's the phrase I was looking for. Break the spirits of the Palestinian people.
Yeah.
And that's been the consistent thing, right? The only thing that they can do is break their spirits, because that's probably the only thing that will break them. And and their spirit, their faith, their belief in themselves, their love for their country is what's keeping them going.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Hamas's resistance, but it's been the willpower of the people that has kept the Palestinian people going, which is a incredible example to the rest of us. For myself especially, I look at it and I think, wow, they never give up. They've never given up. And amongst it all, they've shown incredible courage and beauty. And that will be their legacy, I think.
Kia ora. Yeah. And they know that. Israel knows that. They are, the Palestinian people's resolve is the one thing that Israelis can't just bomb away.
Yep, the resolve, that's the one.
And, the colonization of, the colonization of the mind is that it takes a different kind of warfare, and they have been trying to psychologically destroy the people of Gaza and people of Palestine, and they just have failed miserably. They are systematically abducting and torturing Palestinians, and have been for the last 50 years especially, and it hasn't broken the Palestinian people's spirit. And you look at the horrific things that they're doing to their hostages, and the Palestinians resist. Kapai, so that's not the only place that the US-Israeli empire is attacking at the moment. So the US is also bombing Yemen again. They've killed 53 people in the latest airstrikes. And the reason is because they're attacking Israeli ships and ships related to Israel going through the Red Sea. And in this case, actually, Ansar Allah, or the Houthis, as they're called in the West, have actually stopped attacks on shipping through the Red Sea. But because Israel has been entirely blocking all entry of food and aid into Gaza for the last few weeks, Yemen said, Ansar Allah said, we're going to resume our strikes of shipping through the Red Sea that's related to Israel. And so the US bombed them. And, they bombed civilians. They bombed civilian areas. Here is one example where they bombed a farm.
Oh.
And you can see they targeted this livestock farm. It's just a crater right in the middle of the farm. And this is not new. In fact, US war on Yemen is not new. They backed Saudi war. The US and European allies backed the Saudi war on Yemen, which caused the world's worst humanitarian disaster. And in it, they also targeted specifically agricultural sites. And they targeted around 357 at that stage.
Wow.
In 2016. And so they have been systematically impoverishing Yemen for a long time, and this is just a continuation of that pattern.
Yeah, wow. So it's like block off food going into Gaza, and for Yemen just bomb their farms. Like all of these things should be declarations of war, all of these things.
Of course.
But because of the dehumanization, as you say, because we view all of these people as lesser than, as terrorists, they all deserve it. It's crazy, but New Zealand, Australia, all of us, like we're such slaves to the USA. We're all going to look back on this. We're all going to look back on this and be like, wow, everyone did nothing. And I think we're being harsh on the Arab leaders, the Arab states, who have, you know, as people say, not done as much as they should. Like, why is it simply up to them and not up to us? You know, we're countries partnered with the USA. It wouldn't be hard for our leaders to just pick up the phone and be like, hey, we don't approve of that. But it never happens. So, you know, all of this focus on the Arab leaders letting down Palestine. We're all letting down Palestine and Yemen.
And the Arab leaders are letting down Palestine because they have already sold out to the United States. It's because of the United States' involvement that they have captured all of these Arab states. But the Arab people stand with Palestine. The vast, vast, vast majority of the Arab world very strongly stands with Palestine. And I didn't go into it, but also in Palestine, the ramping up of the ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. They're also, so last figures that we had was 40,000 people have been ethnically cleansed out of the West Bank, and they have demolished 65% of their critical infrastructure. So, and the Euromed Monitor is calling it genocidal violence at this stage on the West Bank. So all of this is also happening, but they don't like to cover the West Bank in our news because there's no Hamas in the West Bank. So they just don't go there because it doesn't fit their narrative that they're going there for the hostages, they're going there to fight Hamas. They're absolutely destroying the West Bank, ethnically cleansing people. They have nowhere to go. They're demolishing infrastructure, and that has no justification whatsoever, not even a weak one. So they just don't cover it. And it's all part of Israel's plans to ethnically cleanse Palestine and build their settlements of it, as they've been doing for the last 75 years. In terms of Yemen, we have the United States all along trying to crush Yemen's ability to be independent and sovereign and be able to provide for themselves and not be fully captured by neoliberal globalist giants. And so this is what it's about. It's about taking over the countries of the Middle East. Right now as well, Israel's expanding into Syria. They're taking more land. They already occupied, through the US and Israel together, occupying around a third of Syria. And now they're expanding, and also they're still bombing Lebanon. So all of these things are happening. And, you know, any one of these incidents alone could be portrayed like October 7th.
Right.
And the media could say, this is horrific, everyone must condemn it, so on and so forth. You know, in this last attack for 3 days, 700 Palestinians were killed. That's likely to be around, if not more, the same number of people that Hamas killed on October 7th, because it's looking like it's very likely that Israel killed most of the people on that day. So just those 3 days alone, and of course within the context of a genocide and destroying the entire land. But let's look at our government's response to all of this. So Winston Peters made a tweet. He said New Zealand is deeply concerned about renewed fighting in Gaza. Renewed fighting. So not even pinpointing who is causing the violence and bloodshed. A permanent end to the fighting needs to be found. Again.
Oh, he's so annoying.
Who knows who started the fighting, whose fault it is.
Just tell us what you mean, Winnie.
New Zealand has consistently called for a ceasefire and de-escalation of tensions.
By Israel. Like, look at his whole message. It's just so non-committal.
He doesn't mention anything. It's the weakest thing I've ever seen. This is critical for ending the incomprehensible human suffering over the past year and a half. Doesn't even say Palestinians in all of this. All he says is renewed fighting in Gaza. Does not even give a mention to, at that stage, I think we had known that around 400 Palestinians were killed. New Zealand calls on both sides to reinstate the ceasefire. It's so weak. Israel broke the ceasefire. They refused to go through to the next phase of the negotiations, and they had just committed a massacre killing hundreds of Palestinians, and he just says we call on both sides to reinstate the ceasefire. So that's the extremely weak response from our government. And I just wanted to pull this up to compare, because when the October 7th attack, Nanaya Mahuta shared this tweet: Aotearoa is deeply concerned at the outbreak of conflict. We call for the immediate cessation of violence. Whoops.
Oh, where did Nanaya go?
She's here now. So she makes this tweet, which is almost identical to, you know, this one. Basically just saying she's concerned, and this was just the day after, so, you know, things are still being clarified. She was assassinated for it by every politician and his dog, by every media outlet, all the journalists. They grilled her, they grilled Hipkins. How dare she not clearly, unequivocally condemn Hamas for the barbaric attack that they committed just in the exact terms that the United States done. And they just went off at her, and then Labour ended up throwing her under the bus, and she had to apologize, and she made another statement, and it was this whole thing that Labour agreed this wasn't a good comment, blah, 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 blah. And that's because, you know, she knows it's a 80-year-old occupation where Israel consistently massacres Palestinians, and then the one time Palestinians kill Israelis, she knew that it was just another example of violence occurring as a result of the occupation. I mean, I might be giving her too much credit here, but the media attacks on her at this time were unbelievable. And yet, here's Winston Peters being simply deeply concerned, and a vague nothing comment that doesn't mention the Palestinian victims, that doesn't mention that Israel has done the killing, and he's not receiving shit for it. Our media don't care. No one's asking the Prime Minister to grill him, because it's been normalized in this country that Israel is not condemned for their actions, but because, of course, only subhumans are condemned for their actions. Real humans can do anything they want. And of course, he recently went to the United States. Peters and Rubio hold substantive and productive meeting.
Again, you learn nothing in the headline, right? Don't worry, something good happened, but can't really tell you about it.
Man, I've lost some things.
All right, what were you gonna talk about, Samah?
I was going to show the media meeting with him, and oh, here they are. Okay, all right, I found everything. I found everything, everyone. It's fine.
Excellent.
Okay, so basically, they have this meeting, and yeah, you're right. We don't find out much about this meeting ever. They just say they discussed a whole bunch of stuff about security, blah, blah, blah. And it was on the news, and they told us that he had a chat with Rubio, and he's portrayed like he's just just a normal individual in a suit. He looks like a nice guy, doesn't he? Smiling, shaking hands with little old Winston Peters. This guy's a psychopath. He recently...
What's with the forehead?
So...
What are they doing there?
So this is Ash Wednesday. It's called.
Okay. Some religious thing.
Is it? Is that what it's called, everyone? Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's during Lent. It's during Lent, and we used to do it at the Catholic school I used to go to. And it's ash, and you do a cross on your head, and it's a sign. It's meant to be a sign of...
You're the chosen one.
Love, you know, God's endless love for everyone, and tolerance and, you know, beautiful things, right? And he goes on with this ash on his forehead and says, yes, fully support Trump's message about sending them all to hell. They better give the hostages back, of course, forgetting about Palestinian hostages, calls them monsters, and pushes for greater genocide. And this is the person that Winston Peters went to speak to. And, you know, this is religious extremism. Let's just be clear about this. Because for some reason, when it's Christian religious extremism, it's not addressed as such. They only ever refer to Muslim people as, you know, religious extremists. But this is religion extremism and Christian Zionism. You know, there's more Christian Zionists than there are Israeli Zionists.
Like Jewish Zionists? You think there's more Christian Zionists?
There are, just number-wise, in the United States. So they are a massive factor in all of this. And they're anti-Semitic themselves. They believe in this whole prophecy where all Jewish people die or convert to Christianity. But before that happens, they have to all be moved to Israel. So it's this whole creepy, culty...
Something about a Red Bull?
All sorts of weird stuff. Yes,
So
sacrificing a Red Bull.
This is the corridor that I was trying to remember when we were talking about Destiny's Church. And we were trying to... we were exploring connections between Destiny's Church and this Zionist movement. And essentially it comes down to that, right? Evangelical Christianity. Because that's definitely Destiny's Church's ballpark.
Definitely.
But it seems to be the connection, right? Everything is coming back to this very, very powerful movement of evangelical Christians, of which Julian Batchelor is one of them, right? Like, everything seems to be coming back to the evangelical Christians.
Yeah. They play a really massive part in colonization all around the world. And it's because of these ideologies of superiority that are built into evangelical Christianity and this model of separation from nature and from ourselves. I don't want to go into that too much, but it's a big part of colonial culture and just separating the godliness from the earth and seeing it as this out there thing in the universe, as opposed to being part of each and every single one of us and of the land. And so they see people's worth as being linked to their closeness to this imagined exterior being, as opposed to being inherent within each person. And so it's one of the ways that they win over people's minds. But, you know, I don't think he believes in any of this. I don't think he believes in the lessons of the ash on the forehead.
Right. Okay, so what did this guy say?
Okay.
What has he done?
In this video, I wasn't even going to play it. He's just saying he supports Trump's message about opening the gates of hell on Gaza. Now, none of this is asked of Winston Peters. You know, should we be aligning ourselves with the United States as they commit a genocide? Should we be greater building our military alliance in the Pacific? Should we continue with AUKUS? Should we be going over there and just warming up, shaking hands with these war criminals? None of these things were addressed with the media accompanying Winston Peters. And I see this time and time again. Our political officials will go to the United States or will go to these big countries and they take in, you know, they go with a group of media, but they never ask them the hard questions. And I think it's because they want to keep being taken along. They want to keep being sent on these trips, and I think they treat them like fun little holidays. And they don't want to ask questions that rock the boat because then they might not get sent. To
the
do
One
their
News,
job again.
the One News bosses who receive, I don't know what percentage of their funding from the government, but it is a state-funded broadcast outlet, and so who they choose to be their reporters on XYZ, as you say, they're not going to send, like, if we got a job at One News, they probably wouldn't send us to be the reporter in regards to foreign affairs.
No. And, you know, this is the closest we got to them bringing up the question.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Just quickly, have you been briefed or has the government got a position yet on these latest strikes from Israel, from Gaza?
the American government is so fresh in terms of that discussion that they couldn't tell us much more than they had found out themselves.
Does the New Zealand government have a position on it at this point?
Oh, look.
Oh, just to say that the United States actually came out afterwards and said that they were briefed on the attack beforehand. So maybe they were just lying to Winston Peters here, but or they lied after the fact to say that Israel told them when they hadn't in fact told them. It's one or the other, but that's a bit interesting.
The New Zealand government will have a position on it, but the first thing we have to do is find out what it all means before we rush to make comment.
Would you consider it, you yourself, would you consider it a breach of the ceasefire?
Well, again, we've got to find out why this happened, what started it, what's the background.
Just say
We
you
have
don't
too
want to answer the question.
frequently in politics, do I say it, even around the world, where people rush to judgment before they find out all the facts. We are seriously worried to find all the facts, and we'll let you know the moment we do.
Minister, sorry, just...
So once he found out all the facts, and by the way, at this stage, on that day, there were already 400 people confirmed to have been murdered, including this beautiful baby.
Shame.
So at that stage, 400 people confirmed murdered by Israel, and he doesn't want to give a position, right? But even after he learns, we saw that his position was just to say, we hope both sides stick to the ceasefire. So Winston Peters is weak. He's not going to condemn Israel, and our media are just going to allow him to never condemn Israel, no matter how many people they kill. And you contrast that with how they treated Nanaya, and it just highlights the two-sidedness of our media. Now, Winston Peters is not the greatest Zionist in government. He's just weak and pathetic. I don't even know if he believes in any of that. But Chris Bishop is someone who really believes in the Zionist cause. In this response to an email, he says that the email to him was extremely polite, just asked him to support the Green sanction bills. And this is how he responded to them. I agree with you that there must be consequence for breaking international law repeatedly. There must be consequences for the illegal, immoral, and barbaric raping, mutilation, and murder of hundreds of defenseless Israeli citizens at a music festival. Dozens are still being held hostage. So here he's actually pushing atrocity propaganda because there is no evidence that any rapes occurred on October 7th at all, let alone at the festival. Same with these ideas of mutilation. They have been used as atrocity propaganda all along, and he's using it to justify ongoing genocide, and he says there must be consequences. So he still believes that Israel should punish the Palestinian people as a whole for what happened on October 7th. And that is genocidal. That's just him pushing for more genocide. It's just blatantly as clear as that. And he's talking about the dozens held hostage, of course, doesn't care about the thousands of Palestinians held hostage. And
just like, where has this text come from?
An email that someone sent us.
Like, it's just weird. Like, you go back to the previous slide. You can see that he's copied. Well, there's the font is different on consequence for breaking international law repeatedly. So it's just weird that he had to copy paste that part in, like, just to make sure he got that part.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to quote him, but was too lazy to write it. So he
possibly
copied that. Here it is. There is no
I'll let you off on that one, Bishop.
For breaking international law repeatedly. He copied and pasted it without matching style.
Kapai.
And this person's email was extremely polite. And this is how he came back to them. And he's just, you know what it is? Chris Bishop's accusing people who are against the genocide of supporting rape, mutilation, and murder because he himself supports the Israeli rape, mutilation, and murder of Palestinians. And he's projecting that onto us. It's as clear as day, Chris Bishop. Just tell us you love the murder of children and be done with it at this stage, honestly. Now, this is the bill in question. We can zoom out on it.
Again?
Or we can just stay zoomed in. So, as you can see, the Greens have a sanctions bill, and they just need 6 people from the National Party to support it. So we just need 6 National Party members with a conscience, with a little bit of
soul,
bravery,
yeah,
to support this bill to sanction Israel. And you know, there's a Lebanese woman in
identity
the
politics.
National Party, and I don't often like to mention that, but this was brought up by a commenter here who said that he went to speak with her, Rima Nakle, about her continued silence in Palestine. She and Lebanon, seeing as she's from there, she said that she sees her commitment as being a representative for Takanini as preventing her from being able to speak up on issues that, quote, kill her on the inside every day.
Oh.
So that's rough. I was surprised that she said that. And yeah, he said that she said this in person, and he brought up that she's been silent about it and pulled up her Facebook. She said and asked her to point her in the direction of anything that she's done publicly, and she said that she couldn't. But he pointed out that in her maiden speech, she talked about how she wanted to be different, how she didn't see being Lebanese as a mere interesting fact or conversation starter, but she wanted to actually represent her Lebanese heritage. And, you know, this is an opportunity for her to do that, to stand up with the Lebanese people, to stand up with Arabs in general. So, you know, there are potentials that could switch, but...
Good job to this guy.
Yeah.
Mahmoud. Well done.
And that has inspired me. I'm going to try and make a meeting with our MP,
Grant McCallum.
And appeal to him in person, as well as email him, because you never know. I've spoken to Grant McCallum before, and he seems like he's a real human being who, you know, I spoke to him about Palestine, and it seemed to me like it was
He
getting
seemed
through.
like a good listener, but I mean, just like
Who
potentially, what was her name? The National Party Lebanese. Rima. You know, it could be all talk.
Yeah.
Could really simply be all talk. Like, but, you know, these are real people. I am terrible in terms of shutting myself off just because they're National Party, but it is true. You know, these are real people. Good luck to you with Grant McCallum. But yeah, to everyone out there who's thinking about talking to their National Party MPs about this kaupapa, yeah, go for it. Open your heart. Don't be like me. And to anyone who is thinking about doing that, kia kaha. Good job.
Ka pai. That's it for our government's response so far. Here's the other things
The next thing, every time we talk about Palestine, there's just going to be more and more and more. Get that Google off the screen. I can't look at the Google.
So yeah, the government's response so far has been nothing, and our media is not interested in pushing it at all. We're making these deals with the United States. We're growing our military alliance with them, and it's not questioned. It's the same thing happening in Ukraine. So right now, military leaders are meeting to discuss the potential of New Zealand sending a peacekeeping force there, which we do not support. This is done without asking the New Zealand public. All of our journalists are pushing for this to happen, if anything. And it's the same thing with the India trade deal. They're not at all giving us any criticism of us, firstly, making a deal with the Hindu nationalist Modi, just merely days after the commemoration.
Sounds like their version of Zionism, essentially what Modi is pursuing.
Absolutely.
Like a religious extremism.
Absolutely. And I was going to bring up this article, actually, that discussed the relationship between India and Israel, between Modi's government and Netanyahu's government,
right.
And then the way that they've really bonded over their nationalism and Islamophobia, as well as trade, but they do really align philosophically. And that's who we're making deal with days after the commemoration of the Christchurch terror attack on March 15th. And actually, Modi mentions this attack, and this is really interesting. So he is trying to get the government to clamp down on Sikh activists in the country who believe in a separate Sikh state. And he says that it brings up March 15th, and he says, you know, we work together really closely against terrorism, whether it's March 15th or any other terrorist attack. And then he links it with these Sikh activists in New Zealand, basically implying that they're terrorists, because he continues and says, in this context, we have shared our concerns about anti-India activities by some illegal elements in New Zealand. We're confident that we'll continue to receive the support of the New Zealand government in taking action against these illegal elements. So Luxon has said something about clamping down on these New Zealanders just because they're anti-Modi activists. And Luxon gets asked about this by the media, and basically he just says, no, they haven't done anything illegal. It's fine to protest in the country. And the media is like, oh, okay, just a bit of a disagreement. But clearly there's more to that. And we should be concerned about the fact that he's implying that these people are terrorists and that New Zealand needs to clamp down on them, and that Luxon promised something, right? And we should be concerned about making a trade deal with someone who has contributed to massacres of Muslims and who leads this Hindu nationalist government. And we should in general be concerned about trade deals, the impact that that has on India's farmers in terms of our agricultural products flooding their market, but also in terms of our continued reliance on exporting these highly harmful exploitative goods such as dairy and meat. And so these questions are not asked at all. If anything, our media is just pushing for this trade deal to go faster. Growth, yeah, growth, without asking whether this is actually growth in a space that we want to grow. Do we need more dairy? Do we want to move away from the fact that we export 95% of our dairy to different sorts of goods? Or should we be locking ourselves in perpetuity into these industries? These are all questions that are not asked. And the same with Ukraine. It's just completely in complete alignment with the government position on these issues. And you know, when it comes to Ukraine as well, the way that this is, I just want to talk about the way that it's been presented in our media as being, you know, firstly, they brought up Ukraine initially and made, you know, a lot of noise about it when the Russian invasion began.
Right.
And then it sort of disappeared off our news media and we just didn't hear about it much at all. Now, all of a sudden, they've come back and they've said, oh, the United States is pulling out their support from Ukraine. It hadn't even really been made clear to the New Zealand public that this was America's war to begin with, that they were able to pull the plug at any moment. This has been made abundantly clear now that it is America's war. They decided when it was to end. But it's been portrayed across the board as this massive shift in US policy that has come about because of Trump, and Trump being just so different and so out there and just having such a fundamentally different policy on Ukraine than the Democrats. I don't personally buy into that. I think the United States has the United States agenda, and Trump is just continuing that agenda. I think they've done what they wanted to do in Ukraine, which is destroy Ukraine, weaken the Russian army, whatever they wanted to do, use whatever weapons they wanted to use, and sell whatever weapons they wanted to sell, all of those business deals.
Yeah, and I think we shouldn't brush over that point. Like,
yeah,
weapons have a shelf life.
Exactly.
You know? Like, the backbone of our economy is dairy. The backbone of the US economy is weapons. It's as simple as that. And so they dumped all of their old weapons in their support of Ukraine, gave it to the Ukrainians, dumped all of their old stuff there. Now they've only got their new, shiny, expensive stuff, which they need to save for all of their other terrible battles and wars that they're cooking up all over the world. And now, the minerals deal that's going ahead. They've put themselves in a perfect position.
The minerals deal needs to be talked about more as well, because not only have they been taking over Ukraine through their neoliberal agenda anyway, destroying their infrastructure and then rebuilding it with the likes of BlackRock, the same thing they did with Iraq, but also now they're forcing Ukraine to sign on to this deal that gives the US control over, we'll find out exactly once the deal is made, but over large parts of Ukraine's minerals. So it's like they destroy their country, the United States, by getting them into this war with Ukraine. And now they're demanding that they...
And just saying that, essentially, that they're going to have unwavering support for them. And other world leaders have had that same line. That, essentially that we're going to go to the end with you. All of these promises that we're going to stand by you, we're going to support you. And now they're just backed out. Yeah.
I mean, is there any more evidence that New Zealand needs that it's not safe to be an ally with the United States? Because this is so, the way that they've done Ukraine dirty. Firstly, I wasn't going to go into it, but I'm just going to super quick go into it. Jeffrey Sachs has talked about this a lot. The way that United States has been plotting to expand NATO in the area surrounding Russia since the 1990s, and the way that US officials have warned about this all along, that this will cause a reaction from Russia. I highly recommend reading his work if you want to learn more about it. But this has been openly discussed by US officials, ex-NATO people, and so on. They've openly discussed the fact that NATO expansion is the reason for Russia's invasion. And Jeffrey Sachs also traces the actual shooting war back to 2014, when the US helped to overthrow the democratically elected government of the time, which was pro-Russia. They wanted peace with Russia.
Right.
And they put in an anti-Russia government and continued their expansion of NATO, refused to sign any deals with Russia to say that they won't expand and that Ukraine won't join NATO. Russia then, yes, illegally invaded Ukraine, and war is never justified no matter what. But these are also facts that also happened. They invaded Ukraine, and then the US, even at that stage, the US and Western powers, there is evidence of them stopping any negotiations and peace deals going through and forcing Ukraine to continue war. There are United States officials saying that Ukrainians should fight until the last Ukrainian. Eek. And they tried to push Ukraine to lower the age for conscripts.
Oh, yeah, that's crazy.
It's outrageous just how awful they have been to Ukrainians. And after so many Ukrainians have killed, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been killed, and however many Russians as well. And now the US is like, well, we also want your minerals. We're going to pull out all of a sudden, and we're going to humiliate you on a public stage. So they've treated Ukraine so very, 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 very dirty. I feel really horribly for the Ukrainian people, and I feel awful as well that the way these people have pretended to be pro-Ukraine by pushing for war, when in fact we should have been pushing for negotiations with Russia all along.
Yeah.
Because now they're negotiating with Russia, but they're giving up more land than they needed to, if they could have just agreed to the same deal to not expand NATO to begin with. Now they're going to agree that Ukraine doesn't become part of NATO, but also Ukraine gives all that land to Russia. So it's been a horrible deal for Ukraine.
I just wonder as well, like, do we have that meme available? And it's got all of those, allies of the. And while you're looking for that, I'll just mention, it's just one of the things that we've been learning about in terms of looking into Ukraine. It's not something that I'm an expert on or that I can say any objective facts about, but there is an interesting aspect to Ukraine in terms of they have indigenous populations in Ukraine, and I'm going to look at it in the context. I'm going to draw analogies with Māori here in Aotearoa, and how we have things like Whakata Māori. You know, we have our own language. We have our own cultural things that are supported by the government to help us live our culture. And there are some similar things in Ukraine. Indigenous groups who have their own channels, who have their own initiatives to whakamana their reo, their language, to, you know, bolster their language. And the Ukrainian government, interestingly, before all of this happened, started making cuts to those places, started removing these channels, started impeding on the tino rangatiratanga of the tangata whenua in Ukraine, which is a interesting thing considering I forget what the names of these neo-Nazi groups are.
Like the Azov Battalion, who the Western media openly said were Nazi groups, but then once the war on Ukraine started, they turned them into heroes and gave them awards.
And I just say it just to say that, you know, there are strange relationships, strange things going on in Ukraine, and perhaps we'll talk about it in the next episode since I've alluded to it a little bit.
Well, yeah, it's part of them electing a Russia-phobic government in 2014, the United States, and increasing that tension between Russia and Ukraine. And they do this all over the world. They put governments in place that are highly antagonistic of their neighbors in order to cause war in those regions. And then they profit, of course. The US always profits. You know, they've come out on top on all of this. They've been able to sign those weapons deals. Now they get Ukraine's minerals and whatever deals they made with Russia. I'm sure it's all working out in their favor.
All right, what does this mean?
This meme is just perfect, right? So and someone alluded to this in the comments as well, that it's more dangerous to be, it may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal. All of these people that you see here used to be America's friends, from Osama bin Laden to Saddam Hussein to Gaddafi. All of these people that the United States allied with to get what they wanted for a wee while, and then eventually ended up, murdering them. And so they haven't killed Zelensky yet, but this meme just alludes to the fact that they've turned on him in the same way that they've turned on all these guys. And I just think it says a lot. I love this meme.
And I think we should probably mention a little bit about, because the article that you brought up before mentioned peacekeepers. And the reason why we don't support sending peacekeepers is because, that's a job of those who are causing the war. It's like telling civilians here in Aotearoa to clean up the externalities of the dairy industry. If we are having to send peacekeepers because they have created a war, we are filling a gap,
exactly.
A role that they should be filling themselves. We're having to be their police and their bodyguards and their, humanitarian aid personnel, sweeping up, mopping up, cleaning up after them. And in a way, although it's for humanitarian efforts and peacekeeping efforts, it's just a part of that more complete picture of what a war requires. If we don't fill that role, then we're making the war look better. We're essentially greenwashing their war because we're cleaning up the nastier aspects. Those nasty aspects shouldn't have been created in the first place.
Yeah. Plus, we're aligned with the United States. So whatever roles that we play are always going to align with the United States. And the United States never has good intentions. It's never about keeping peace. It's always to uphold whatever regime they've put in place. And that's what the peacekeepers will be there to do in Ukraine. Instead of just giving Ukraine sovereignty, they're going to put all these external groups to try and uphold whatever systems the United States wants. When really, all the money should be, and all of the support should be going directly to Ukrainians on the ground. They don't need New Zealanders to do anything. They just need Ukrainians to be empowered to do their own thing, and for the US and Russia to stop warring on their lands.
What are you on about, Peter Bailey? Free trade deal with Russia. Shouldn't be having free trade agreements with anyone. if you ask me. Like free trade agreements, like how do they make sense? Like the main reason why our government gets upset when it has free trade agreement discussions, they get upset because no other country wants to buy our dairy. They all just want to produce their own dairy in their own countries. They don't want to be, buying what we want to sell them, which is our incredibly cheap dairy, and it's incredibly cheap because of those externalities that the rest of us have to clean up. But because our dairy is so cheap, it undercuts all of their local farmers. If you're a local dairy farmer in Russia and they get a free trade agreement, and our dairy is involved in that free trade agreement, it's going to undercut every local dairy farmer in Russia. And that's why for local producers, free trade agreements are awful, because whatever massive capitalist entity is creating whatever product over there for a fraction of what it's actually worth, those who have local smaller economies, smaller production facilities creating those products in more ethical ways will just be completely undercut. And then they'll have to assimilate into that capitalist system of producing their good for less than what's being imported. And it's just that endless cycle of us assimilating into that capitalist system, devaluing over and over and over. So free trade agreements, I think, just it's hooking us into and making us and ensuring we stay reliant into that globalized system, and particularly a globalized food system, which is the furthest away from a country's own self-sufficient food system for their own selves. So not a fan of free trade agreements, no matter the country. And Samah, what are you doing? You've been making a lot of clicks. What are we doing? You're in like a click panic mode right now. Let's go. I think we should move on to the next Kaupapa.
Bye. What's our next Kaupapa?
The next Kaupapa, I really did want to talk about Earthbeat, but before we do that, I'm just going to quickly try to take us through what have you done with your clicking, Samah? Look. Okay. So local elections, e te iwi, they're coming up, right? Please, if you have not thought about it, think about where you are enrolled to vote. If you're a transient type person and you're not in the same electorate often, please just have a think about it. Have a think about it, because it is really important. When me and Samah were in between locations, Craig Jepson got elected in the Kaipara. And it was difficult for us to vote. It wasn't that easy. It wasn't as easy as the general elections. It was just, to be honest, it was a bit more of a pain in the ass than I thought it was going to be. So just have a think about it. It is really important. Local elections is often forgotten, because general elections is just, it's like the Super Bowl. It's like the big game. But the way I see it, the central government sets the rules of the game. Right? Central government sets the rules, and then it's the local governments who implement and referee those rules, and maybe bend the rules a little bit, and no one's really going to see because they are the ones implementing it. So central government, yeah, really important, really, really important. But local governments, they are the ones who really move the pieces in our local areas. So don't undervalue them. We historically consistently get a lower turnout at local elections compared to general elections, okay? And there are many reasons for that. One of the, it just doesn't get attention. It just doesn't get attention. So, and the system needs to be updated. The electoral system that makes recommendations has been saying that they need to move away from the letterbox system, which is currently what it is. That's why it can be difficult if you're transient, you don't have a fixed address, you might not get your papers kind of thing. And of course, they're still doing the whole, if you own property in multiple electorates, you get a vote in each of those respective electorates, which is tied in with your physical address. So the whole thing...
One man, one vote.
Yeah, it's that whole one man, one vote kaupapa, which is a similar vibe to Earthbeat, to be honest, but we'll talk about that. Previously I talked a little bit about the Taxpayers Union. Of course, they're tied into all of these groups, right? The Taxpayers Union, along with the Free Speech Union, I struggle to differentiate between those two groups, to be honest, but they are the two groups you'll often find at the center of all of these astroturf groups, as we refer to them, these fake grassroots groups who claim to be from the grassroots, but really they're just acting in corporate interests. They're definitely not acting to the interests of what they say they're acting towards, right? They're very deceptive in that sense. Even, I think when Taxpayers Union was set up, they were not a union. They've been able to move around and have themselves registered as a union, but at first they weren't a union. They're just a group, just you know, claiming it, and just makes them sound better, makes them sound more official, right? Anyway, always be cautious when you see the Taxpayers Union.
Or Curia.
And then we have Curia. Curia is the polling, oh, this is not going to work, is the polling arm of Taxpayers Union. Okay, Curia Market Research is run by David Farrar, who was a co-founder with Jordan Williams to the Taxpayers Union. Mm-hmm. And they're all also members and probably founding members, Jordan Williams definitely and David Farrar, of the Free Speech Union. Okay, so that's how they're linked in. Then we have Curia Market Research, and I'm going to try to find a better, more... Here we go. So Curia Market Research, they put out polls very often. David Farrar, who runs Curia, he used to be National's favorite pollster, and he used to work for National as well. He's been creating polls for a long time. They used to run under what's called RANZ, which is the Research Association of New Zealand, something along those lines. They create professional standards for pollsters in Aotearoa. They're the only group who does that. For a long time, Curia was with them and meeting their professional standards, I guess, because I hadn't seen any complaints against them prior to this. They have actually removed themselves, deregistered, resigned themselves from this organization. So now they don't actually have to match the standards of this group. And this is the only group in Aotearoa who sets these kinds of standards, okay? But because Curia has been going for a really long time and has customers like Pfizer, they have a reputation. They're already embedded into the way we look at and understand polls. Mm-hmm. People might remember the poll that they put out, and it was talking about the popularity of mayors. Okay? And when you look into the numbers of how it all went, in this poll that they did, looking at people's likability or favorability of mayors, Craig Jepson, who's this notorious, infamous racist of Kaipara, he came third.
What a joke.
He came third, which is just insane. Insane. However, when you look at the numbers closer, you can see that for Craig Jepson, there was an error margin of 9.6%. 9.6%, which is crazy. So he got 35% approval rating, put him in third place. Moko Tepanya, 39%, he got first place. Craig was very close. Like they could have fudged that just a little bit more and they might have been able to get Craig in first place. But I guess going over 10% would have looked a little bit crazy.
That's interesting because the other error margins are closer to the 5%.
Yeah.
Like Kaipara's one is randomly 9.6%.
Yeah. Oh, he in terms of margin of error, he has the second highest.
Oh,
so he's on 9.6, and the only other higher one is like all the way down here for Masterton, 17th. So in terms of the 16 highest,
imagine that
he had the highest margin of error, and it's like just totally cooking the numbers in this regard, totally cooking the numbers. And why do they do it? Well, they need to produce positive stories for Craig Jepson. What were we gonna say?
Oh, just outrageous. And one of those people, his approval ratings was like at 12%, and the error margin rate was like 9%. What a joke of a poll to even have that kind of data.
Yeah. And like I couldn't look into the methodology and the data when Curia put out a poll about the Treaty Principles Bill. But with their numbers, they said that the majority of Kiwis supported the treaty principles bill. Like I would have loved to have seen how they got those figures. But anyway, okay, so looking into their poll that they did around mayoral approval, who do they poll, right? Who do they ask? Who do they get this data from? Well, they got the data from 24,000 people. 19,000 were by phone.
Come on now.
Okay? About 5,000 from an online panel. So 19,000 by phone. I think you just need to like think about it. Who is most likely to respond to a phone survey? Like I Googled it and I got AI to help me out a little bit to understand the demographic. And of course, you know, it's the older demographic, said usually more educated and more likely to be women. The women part doesn't really match up with my analysis, but you can think about it, right? It's the older people. It's people who probably have more time on their hands. Those are the people that I think of when it comes to people who'd be willing to fill out some kind of phone survey. And of course, if you've got time on your hands, you know what demographic you're in. Come on. And so they said it was a randomly selected 15,000 phone numbers from landlines and mobiles, but they don't break up the difference, like which came from landlines, which came from mobiles. If the majority came from landlines, then we know that they're coming from fixed addresses, right? People who have houses. And you look up from Stats NZ and they tell us that Māori and Pacifica are in the lowest bracket for home ownership. So they don't give it to us, but I mean, there is a chance that the majority of people they contacted via phones was from landlines. Okay. Yeah. And so that's going to skew where the vote goes. Okay. And additionally, strangely, in terms of who they polled online, it says a random selection from the target population from up to 3 global online panels.
Global. 3
global online panels is what they say. And they say here it complies with ESOMAR guidelines, which is a international organization, right? They're now going to the international organization who probably has like a more generalized set of guidelines instead of being with our domestic Aotearoa centric body.
Hilarious.
It's stupid. So
yeah, but what's with the global?
Yeah, 3 global online panels. I don't know. Are they asking people in Sri Lanka if they like Craig Jepsen? I don't know. It's unclear. Additionally, they say that target population. So they're also in their target population, people that they're targeting. They say that they're only looking at people who are eligible and likely to vote. So you have to have indicated that you're likely to vote. So of course that means people who essentially like the current people who are in power in their electorate. Because if you don't like what's going on, like if I was in Kaipara and I didn't like what was going on, then I'm less likely to vote. You know, if you're unhappy with your current leader. And also, we haven't seen who else has put their name forward. So we don't even know if we're going to get someone better than Craig Jepsen in the next election. These types of things to encourage people to vote haven't even come out yet. So they're targeting, of course, a biased population. They're potentially getting all of their targeted people from landlines, fixed addresses, which is more likely to be from Pākehā. And they've weirdly said that the people that they've polled online come from some kind of global panel. And then additionally from that, there was another thing in here. Well, response rate, right. Those who said they were unlikely or very unlikely to vote were excluded.
What's with that?
So even if you said, no, I don't know, I'm not sure, I'm unlikely to vote, then you're excluded. So if you're someone who has some kind of disagreement, dissent, distrust, you know, and you're a little bit on the fence, and of course those people are still voters, you know, and polls, like this is just a good example of how polls work. They're there to cement the current people who are in power. Those who are not interested in voting, who are probably the people who are upset with the current system, that dissent is not captured, you know? We should be asking people, you know, who would you vote for in an ideal situation? Because that's how you encourage people to vote. If we just continue down this pathway of only hearing from people who are happy with the current system, then we're just going to stay on that trajectory, and we're never going to hear from people on the outsides. We're never going to hear anything except for the mainstream narrative, and that's why Curia creates these types of puff pieces, these pieces of propaganda in this way. And then you see it very shallowly reported on by the media. This is a funny one with Tanya Tapsell. Tanya Tapsell, she tried to run for as a national candidate. She lost her electorate, and then she decided to become the mayor of Rotorua instead. But it, you know, it gives people like her and those who support her an opportunity to big her up. This is a whole article that was created with her as the front runner. Rotorua mayors ranked in nationwide poll, and it's like celebrating her. Of course, she didn't win. You know, that was Moko Te Pānga, and she'd have to beat Craig Jepson first, you know. They say that Tanya Tapsell was the most popular mayor in Bay of Plenty. Wow, the most popular mayor of Bay of Plenty. So, you know, not the most popular mayor, but just the most popular mayor in Bay of Plenty.
They cooked up an award for her specifically, and I saw, you know, an article on Facebook, and we know the vast majority of people don't click on articles when they see them on Facebook, just the headline and the description. And from looking at that, it almost made her look like the overall winner. Like it was like she came out on top, woohoo, celebrating her without much information. And I thought it meant that she had won, and it wasn't until I clicked into the article and read and saw that she came like 5th or something.
Right, yeah, 5th.
Kiwi Burb says that a global online panel is a group of pre-recruited individuals from various countries who have agreed to participate in market research, providing insights and feedback through a digital environment. So the global panel is the global researchers who are taking in this information. But as Kiwi Burb says, why the heck do we need anyone international to be researching data on New Zealand voting habits?
Yeah, or any kind of international body like that. I mean, I assume their system is probably fairly sophisticated, right? They've probably got people cut up into the demographics that they represent. But yeah, what's the need to go to a global online pool like that? Just start doing polling techniques here in Aotearoa that actually reach our people. But it's just like the electoral system for local government in general. They're not keen on moving or shifting to any type of system that actually gets us a representative display of the reality, because they're happy with the current trajectory of what's going on.
And you know, it's funny with the kaipara thing. Only about 40% of people voted for Craig Jepson. Voted altogether in the kaipara elections. Only 40% voted altogether.
Yeah.
And then he won. And then the taxpayer Curia research only looked into those 40% or around about that number of people who voted. So of the offset, they're excluding 60%. And then of those 40%, they said that 35% of them approve of Craig Jepson, but then there is a 9-point-something% margin of error. So it could be as low as 20% of the 40% of kaipara, which if you were to work it out is such a small minority of kaipara. And then add to the fact that they're potentially further narrowing it down with doing landline phone calls, and you see just how skewed the picture is. And these are people that are constantly taken seriously by our media. but also by us. You know, we all, well, we try not to, but often people on the left will share the Curia polls if they get something they like. But as you have said before, that validates these polls in general, when we should just be boycotting them altogether because it's part of the AstroTurf Taxpayers Union.
Kia ora. And something to think about if people are thinking about local elections. Oh, of course, the ACT Party, right? The ACT Party has signaled that they are going to start putting candidates in local elections. Now, we already know in Kaipara, for example, their ACT affiliate there is, I forget his name, he calls himself the Work Boot Councillor. He's the current deputy.
Oh.
He's been seen at you know, I wouldn't call him ticketed, but you know, ACT Party gatherings in a supporting capacity.
Are you talking about Simon Cook?
No. What's his name? It's on the tip of the tongue. Tip of the tongue.
Oh, the councillor. So that's like,
Yeah. The deputy of Kaipara Council.
The Whakaria Mai guy.
Yes, the Whakaria Mai guy.
We have to play that video for people one day because they deserve it. Okay, so one day at a Kaipara Council meeting, we often used to go and present against the council's racist, anti-Māori, anti-environment agenda. And one time this guy, and he's extremely racist, this councillor, I forget his name, but he opened his speech because they changed the rules where you don't have to open the meeting with karakia anymore. You can open with anything. And he chose to open with Whakaria Mai. And he belted out this extremely serious gospel song, Whakaria Mai, really loudly in Te Reo Māori, in full. And it was just interesting because he's also very racist. But he's just happy to incorporate it when it comes to gospel music.
Jonathan Larsden is the fella. Yeah, and well, it's interesting, right? He's a church boy. Nothing wrong with church boys. It's good to have a bit of faith, especially if you like singing waiata. It's very nice. But I think that's probably where he built up his appreciation and love for singing Whakaria Mai. I reckon it was a church-related kaupapa for him. But so, the ACT Party are running in local elections, not local electorates, local elections, and it's concerning because when you think about Three Waters, okay, the campaign of Three Waters, it went all over the country, and that was primarily a taxpayer union run campaign. And I'm not going to bring the video up, but there was a leaked video of a taxpayer union meeting where they talked about Three Waters, where they talked about how they were able to turn this really obscure kaupapa into the most talked about political issue on the election agenda. That was their power, the taxpayers union. They pulled their strings, they utilized their resources and their expertise to create the most talked about election issue for that round of the elections. So they're incredibly, incredibly powerful. It cannot be understated. And so with us knowing that the Taxpayers Union is linked in with the ACT Party, of course, Jordan Williams, he used to work as a staffer, I believe, for the ACT Party. And he has all sorts of connections. During Don Brash's attempt to rise to power of the National Party, he was working with Don Brash during that time. And so they're all connected, and they're incredibly powerful. They have the power to organize all over the country. And in this leaked video from the Taxpayers Union, they talked about how they have been able to elect their people who campaigned, you know, on an anti-Three Waters, anti-co-governance agenda. They were able to get those people elected. So an incredibly powerful affiliate group of the ACT Party has already proven its ability in local elections to appoint mayors that they want and councillors that they want. And so we need to be doing something similar. But, you know, I'm not that worried because, I mean, when the ACT Party tried to put electorates in for the general election, it was a shambles. Like, what the ACT Party are currently doing for local elections, they're saying that people will have to self-fund their campaigns. So they're essentially just looking for some like rich pricks who are willing to put themselves up and pay for themselves to give ACT a voice in those electorates. And it's probably for some people, for them to put themselves up and to pay for a campaign, maybe that's better than just them donating directly to the ACT Party. You know, different funding pools and things like that. But, you know, when they did set people in the electorates for the general election, they were losing people left, right, and center. You know, people who had said incredibly sexist, racist things. They weren't vetting people. And so it ended up being like a lot of like really bad publicity for the ACT Party.
We're going to end up with so many cookers.
A lot of cookers, I'm sure, yeah. But Ehoma, do not forget about the importance of local elections. Like, if you are not out there this year talking to your whānau, talking to your friends, talking to your work colleagues about local elections, then please do it now. I remember when Craig Jepson's little booklet came to us while we were in Kaipara, and I just read it and I thought it was an absolute joke. It was just anti-co-governance stuff. That was it. Not, oh, I'm going to like fix the schools. I'm going to fix the town hall. I'm going to make sure that our hospital runs properly. You know, all things that are issues in Dargaville. No, just anti-co-governance stuff. And he was able to get through. He didn't need to attend any town hall meetings to make his case or anything like that. It was just a anti-co-governance pamphlet that did it for him.
Yeah, it's sad just how so many local councillors, mayors, and also politicians were able to just rely purely on people's racism to win the elections. And, you know, that's why I don't necessarily think that that the racism aspect was just a small thing that they've slipped in, because, you know, people like Craig Jepson, people like National ACT and New Zealand First, they were really explicit from the very get-go that they were running an anti-Māori agenda, and people voted for it. Granted, only 40% of people in Kaipara voted, but of those people, they voted for it. So he was able to win off the back of a racist agenda.
Yeah. So
that is the wider issue that we need to deal with, which is decolonizing the minds of people in our society, working on the racism, the settler racism in our society. That's something that we have to do on a grassroots level as well. That needs to come with our organization for local politics. But of course, a massive part of it is just convincing our people to vote. No better example than Craig Jepson. That's what happens when our people don't vote, because it's our non-voting population that's more likely to be against the kind of racist, anti-environmental, destructive, anti-worker stuff that these guys do. So a big part of it is just getting people to vote. And
like, people think it's inconsequential, but it's really not. Like, the main kaupapa for me is, well, don't really have a main kaupapa anymore because they all just melt into one, to be honest. But fresh water regulation, that's mainly up to the councils in terms of enforcing their bylaws. So if there's a farmer who's dumping effluent, dumping poison, spraying when he shouldn't, and all of these things, it's up to local councils to enforce the law there. And when you have a corrupt council, and time and time again, councils, whether it's like ECAN, you know, ECAN's probably one of the worst, but councils have been failing to bring farmers into line, because the demographics that we've been talking about, in terms of people who mainly vote, in terms of people who mainly own property, that demographic is very heavily weighted in the farmer area. And so farmers have been dominating our local councils, and people who benefit from the farming industry dominate our local councils. And now just look at our waterways all throughout Aotearoa. Majority of them, and particularly those in areas with high levels of agriculture, unswimmable, or they have pathogens to the level of where it is considered unsafe to swim. That's the result of us not caring about local elections. They are the ones who implement the rules created by central government. It doesn't matter how good the rules are created by central government if we don't have local government implementing those rules. And, you know, it's so sad, I think, that the ACT Party is going to go down this route because they have such a extremist, really, like if you look at Craig Jepson, for example, in these results, oh, it's not in this one. It's in the stronger breakdown. Oh, here we go. Craig Jepson, see, look, if you, in terms of poor, oh, you can't see it, right? 1 second. Kaipara, 20% in terms of poor, people who thought he was doing a poor job. I think that might be the highest. Oh, never mind. All the way down in 24th place. That's when it starts to get a higher number than Craig. But anyway, so people who thought he did poorly, he scored very high on that.
Right.
And he also scored very high, I think maybe the highest, in terms of people who thought he's doing a good job. I think he scored the highest. Yeah, he scored the highest. And so makes sense that he also scored the highest in the other, because then they subtract the poor from the good, and that's how they get their net good figure. So anyway, I just bring it up to say that very contrasting positions. You either love or you hate Craig Jepson. And that's gonna be the same thing with the ACT Party. If they start pushing their candidates, we are going to have to start pushing our candidates, and then it becomes a very contrasting electoral system where those in the middle will get frustrated because both sides are just so contrasting to one another. And what is happening is we are having to think about only putting up one good candidate. Because if they're extremely organized on the other side and simply pushing for their one candidate, then any vote splitting that goes on with our other potential options are gonna fuck up that whole team.
Which is another...
And they're smart enough to focus on their singular.
Mm-hmm.
And so then what does that mean for democracy, right? When we are having to eliminate everyone off our team just so we can have one voice that we all rally around. And then it just becomes the red party or the blue party.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh, not sure. But someone said before, you know, we need to become organized like them. And it's so true. Like they had, like, was it Democracy NZ or one of those groups?
Yeah.
Or NZ Democracy. I've lost
There's all of them. There's Democracy NZ, there's Democracy Now. Oh, they're the good one. They're that American group who makes anti-war stuff. Democracy NZ and Democracy Northland, which Craig, that was Craig Jepson's group.
Right.
They are the ones who ran the petition to try and get rid of Māori wards. And so that was the energy he was running off. Like, it's just been anti-Māori ever since, man.
Yeah.
And but yeah, we need to get organized like them.
Yeah. So these guys, they had, you know, a website, and they said for every single area in the country, this is who you should vote for. And they had all of this set up so that the votes got concentrated on the people that they wanted. We don't have anything equivalent to that on our side.
Should we do it?
Maybe we should.
We do
you know,
that?
Are people interested in that kind of work? And we would just be picking who we think are good candidates based on a list of questions that's sent to all of them.
Let's poll the people. Do people think that that's a good idea? You know, we could put together a website. We could even survey potential candidates. It would be a lot of work, but if we had a team, we could survey potential candidates. How do they feel about... We don't have to go as far as Te Tiriti or Waitangi, but there could be a promise in there around Te Tiriti. There could be a promise in there around education system or our healthcare system. Some of those more big, important kaupapa. But, you know, the thing is, you know, we'd need a lot of volunteers. That's kind of why I'm saying this. It's like, you got to put your hand up to say that you'll do your area kind of thing.
You might get less yes.
But, you know, hey, it's something I'd be willing to look into. I am extremely passionate about local elections because of what has happened in Kaipara. Shook me to the core, to be honest. The fact that you can have someone come in and then be like, unilaterally remove karakia from council meetings, you know?
Day one.
Unilaterally cut I think, 2 co-governance arrangements, or definitely at least 1 co-governance arrangement in Dargaville, unilaterally cut it, or unilaterally amended it so that it would suit his agenda the most. And then
took today out of council documents, suggesting using AI to translate it.
Yeah. And all of these things have such a powerful flow-on effect in society in terms of how it bolsters racism. When that is the level of acceptability coming from your top elected official in your area, it is not at all inconsequential. When you have such an overtly racist person who's happy to make all of those unilateral decisions, and normally you'd be called out for that. If you make a unilateral decision that's undemocratic, you get called out for it and there'd be some type of consequence. But for this guy, there's been nothing. They have real power in these positions. It's not inconsequential. And, you know, the Udi of the Kaipara area will remember deeply what their leader of Kaipara has been doing and has been saying. It's like the Treaty Principles Bill with central government. I will never forgive central government for what they've done to allow the Treaty Principles Bill to go through as far as it has gone. I will never forgive them for that. It's going to be one of the things I'm going to take to my grave in terms of, the government, you did this. And it's going to be the same in Kaipara. And those things become part of us, and it makes us distrust the system. Think of all the Māori in Kaipara who had to deal with people like Alan Titford, those who, you know, lied about Māori burning his house down, who were then demonized on nationwide media. You know, that was Kaipara. That is the whakapapa of the racism in Kaipara. It's very deep, and now we've allowed this very overt race. Anyway, it's not inconsequential, e hoa. It's very important. So please do make sure you give some energy to local elections this year. We will have a think about this resource. I'm seeing a few people put their hands up and a few thumbs up for maybe helping to create this resource. If we spread the word a little bit, there is a group at the moment who's working towards a campaign around Māori wards. So potentially I might float it with them. Maybe they're working on something already. We'll see.
This local election is also the referendum on Māori wards. So it's a big one.
That's a big one. That's a big one. Not inconsequential. All right. What else do we have? It's getting late, but
we could.
I think we need to talk about Earthbeat.
Yeah, should we close up by quickly talking about Earthbeat?
Sorry, I keep showing Google, everyone. Like, I try to use Ecosia, but my browsers just like reset themselves every now and again. Okay. So Earthbeat, you want to give the rundown of how things started with Earthbeat?
So basically this festival asked us to give a workshop about Māori sovereignty if we wanted to, or about Palestine. And
sorry, wait. Can I just say as well, and I'm sorry to go back, e hoa ma. You got to try to not go back because then it just takes forever, right? But Craig Jepson, he's a big pusher of what's called waste to energy. So there's this big power plant that they're thinking of putting in the Kaipara. You know, we've got all of our rubbish and waste and stuff, right? Of course, we don't want to reduce our rubbish and our waste. So we're just going to burn it, send it out into the atmosphere and try to create energy off of it. Craig Jepson has been going all around the world looking at these types of projects. And he's going to set up his business mates to be the main benefactors of this incredibly huge, incredibly gross, incredibly destructive thing. Him and other mayors, other strong businessmen here in the Northland, Kaipara Northland, they're making their moves for this waste to energy plant. So, you know, we're all talking about our issues around racism and how awful he is, but also he is making his business deals in the background. And it's not something he very openly talks about. So just to bring it up again, it's not just about race issues. Like, I don't want anyone being like, oh, you guys always going on about racism.
Yeah.
The racism is usually just there as a front, as a distraction for something that they're actually trying to cover. So the fact that he has been so crazy, disgustingly stupid racist, just like the ACT Party, shows how incredibly sinister, nefarious their inner plan is, because they're having to create such a front for it.
Yeah, and they're willing to associate with such an ugly front because it's still not, at least from their perspective, as ugly as their true agenda, which is just selling out their fellow New Zealanders as well as Māori. And, you know, it's the thing with Māori wards and the thing with Māori representatives is that often they are the ones who are trying to tell us about these other nefarious plans that they've got. So it was Pere Samah, our Māori ward councillor in Kaipara, who alerted us to the fact that Craig Gibson and his other councillors, of which many of whom are friends of his, there's pictures of them hanging out and drinking wine together, so he's put his friends with him in the council. They make plans to, for example, change climate zoning rules so that they could build retirement homes that they have investments in.
Yeah.
So there's corruption all over the scale in terms of changing rules and regulations to allow themselves to profit off certain things. And it was Pere Samah, the Māori ward councillor, who was talking about their corruption. So if we can somehow communicate to the public that these Māori representatives are really just representatives of the people against corporations and against exploitation in general. And they're not just there to speak out on behalf of Māori. Why is that? Because Māori are the indigenous people of this country. Whatever works for the indigenous people of this country works best for this country. It works best for the land because Māori care about the land. It works better for the people because Māori care about the people. And so there's this massive crossover in terms of the advocates for Māori, especially the good ones, especially the ones who have been put in those places because their people support them. They will speak on a more grassroots level in general.
Killed up.
Kapai.
All right.
Earthbeat. Okay, so they asked us to speak at this festival, which is just up slightly north of Auckland. And it sounded
Kaipara, actually.
And dodgy.
Yeah,
and
what
it
does that say now?
sounded interesting. So we were like, yeah, sure. We're going to be in Auckland around that time anyway. So we were going to go and give a workshop called Why Support Māori Sovereignty? And it was going to be just all about how, basically, the spiel I just gave about how it's good for everyone. And then someone, we shared it on our stories. We shared that we're going to be going to this festival.
Yeah.
And then in response, someone got back to us and said, hey, the co-founder and director is a raging Zionist. You should go look at his LinkedIn. And so we did. And, you know, just off the bat, it was our failure to not go and look into that because all we had to do was just Google Earthbeat founder and his name and LinkedIn came up. So if we had done our due diligence, we would have avoided this whole situation. But long story short, we found out after we had already agreed. His stuff on his LinkedIn was horrific, pro-genocide, anti-Arab, Islamophobic, and we just simply could no longer go and present at this festival knowing that a co-founder had those views, co-founder, director, and also they were playing one of his movies at the festival.
And as well, I'll just say we weren't being paid either by Earthbeat. They were paying for our gas, which I was very grateful for. But you know, it's not about money. The whole situation wasn't about money. But we didn't want to give our energy to their kaupapa. Some people have said, you know, oh, I don't understand how you're saying you're stepping down. How is you stepping down really going to help the situation? You know, we have strong stances. We believe in boycotts, but you know, maybe I shouldn't have interrupted your spiel because you're probably going to get to it.
That's fine.
Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Kapai. Well, we made a post and we were like, we're pulling out because of his views, because he's got a movie playing at Earthbeat, and we can't contribute to a festival that thinks it's okay to platform these views and to keep someone on such an organizational level with these views. And they got back to us and they made this public post, which was kind of
well, so, you know, they emailed us as well.
Oh, yes.
We had phone calls. We did discuss this all.
We did discuss it first before making a post. We got in touch and also they called us on the phone. And basically they just felt really strongly that they want to include all views, that they don't want to distance themselves from this person, Isaac, the Zionist, because they believe that this is the way to foster peace and unity, is just to include all voices and to look at all the shadows of society. And so we made a post after that saying, okay, we're going to pull out because, you know, this is the situation. And they ended up responding, and, you know...
And I'll just say first as well. So we had the discussion in email. And, you know, we made the decision. We're like, hey, sorry, we just simply can't do this. Like, this is just does not align with us. We're not comfortable promoting this. We're going to step back. And we're really sorry that we didn't do our due diligence prior to this. Now we've created this difficult situation for y'all. So very apologetic from the get-go from us. And then they insisted, let's have a phone call. And, you know, I appreciate that. It's pretty much the closest you can do to kanohi ki te kanohi. And they explained to us their perspective. And I do appreciate that, them wanting to make sure that we had their perspective. But I'll just say, I'm not going to say the full situation of what happened out of respect for other people at Earthbeat, for other organizers who are working to change Earthbeat. Not going to relay this full conversation, but essentially the conversation ended badly because the person who called me essentially put out a hypothetical situation of taking their current logic to an extreme. And it was very inappropriate. I decided to end the phone call respectfully at that point. And then we decided to make our public post on Instagram that we put out. And that's when they then put out this response.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was interesting because on that phone call as well, they said something that they ended up reiterating online. But basically in this post, you know, it's clear that there are other people who are organizing and volunteering who are uncomfortable with Isaac being a director, co-founder, and also having a movie playing. And so they pulled the movie. The movie will no longer be playing at Earthbeat, or, you know, I don't know if Earthbeat's already happened, but it was taken off the agenda, which is great news. It was a win. And it's a testament to all of those people within Earthbeat, the volunteers and other people who are in the organizing committee who insisted that the movie is taken down. But you can feel in their statement that there's a bit of push and pull, and there's a bit of mixed views, because they say that they remove it, but they also say, you know, we believe, you know, that we need to
make space
for all of the different views. And they ended up with this quote by James Baldwin: not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And that pretty much reflects the philosophy that Earthbeat had when we spoke to them, which is that, you know, there are these shadows in society, it's represented in Earthbeat, but they want to deal with it in the open. But our perspective was that he's not just an attendee, he's not just someone with a view, you know. We're not saying delete him and cancel him from existence altogether, but you cannot have someone that's publicly associating with your name saying outright hateful things. Well, you can, but it's, in our view, unethical. Because it's normalizing those views. It's saying that those views are okay. And then to bring the movie in, you're platforming those views. So again, it's not that those views exist and that some people have those views at the festival like they do everywhere in the world, right? It's the fact that they chose to continue working with him on the organization level and to give him a platform at the festival. It creates the idea that these views are normal, that these views are acceptable. So, and we should note that other co-organizers support Palestine, openly so, and other people have had really good experiences with them, people that we know. But for us, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant that there are pro-Palestine that there is a pro-Palestine movie, No Other Land, was also going to be played as well as this movie. These are not two equivalent views that should both be equally platformed. One of them is against violence and one of them is for violence, and the one that's for violence should not be platformed. And, you know, Earthbeat says he's like a brother to us. And so, you know, what do? We love our brother. We don't just delete our brothers.
Of course. And
this is something that I've said something really similar to, actually, on this very stream. Like, we've all got this idea about having a racist uncle, right? There's a stereotype. We've all got a racist uncle, not literally, but and when we do have those problematic individuals in our family, we don't just shun them. We continue to see them and we try and work on those problematic views slowly over the years. And that's how I think we should treat each other in society as well.
Kia ora.
So I believe in this philosophy. I really do wholeheartedly believe in this philosophy, and I think they should continue to talk to Isaac to try and help him get out of this brainwashed cult that he's in.
We all need healing, and otherwise he's just gonna keep falling down the cracks.
Absolutely. So I do support that whakaaro, but I wouldn't include my racist uncle in organizing a festival with me, and I wouldn't give him a speaking platform at my festival. So yes, continue to love and try and help and support your family members who've gone down these horrible rabbit holes, but that doesn't mean that they should be given platforms and these positions of power. And so one of their responses to us we also wanted to address, because this they asked us numerous times, and some people in the responses also wanted to hear a response to it, which is how we reconcile using Instagram and Facebook, which are both owned by Meta, as our predominant platforms for spreading our message, while simultaneously taking a strong stance against a grassroots festival who invited you to share your message in an uncensored workshop. So they saying this because Meta is Zionist and helps to support the Israeli genocide. So they're like, how can you justify using the Zionist platform, but then not coming to our festival?
Yeah. But I just want to say, first of all, it's just like, take the feedback, Earthbeat, you know? Just take the feedback. You know, we've given you something to work on. And yeah, obviously they're taking steps to reflect on that. And I hope that they do that. But I would also just say, like, you know, I don't know about coming back to the people who have tried to give you some constructive and helpful feedback and then presenting this kind of challenge. You know, I mean, for me, it wasn't a space for this type of back and forth around how we can both improve each other's view. You know, when someone is volunteering their perspective to you around something that's really a good point, I believe, you should take that point and you should probably thank that group or that individual for raising it, and you should probably move on from there.
Yeah, I think it shows that there are these either factions or conflicting views within the Earthbeat organizational group. As they've said, this is a large group, and a lot of them, sorry, not a lot of them, but the ones that we have spoken to struggle to understand why we would use Meta, a Zionist platform, while not going to their event. It shows that they aren't fully there in terms of agreeing with us. They do still in their hearts believe that there is something wrong with our logic. For some of them anyway. And so what's our response to that? Well, you know, this is just similar to the argument of like, you can't be anti-capitalist if you're using a phone or you're using any aspect of capitalist society in the first place, right?
Yeah, you can't be vegan because you're breathing in particles of oxygen who might have small micro living organisms in it. So really, you're not a true vegan. Yeah, I mean, in terms of boycotts, you know, we believe in boycotts, BDS, veganism, boycotting violence, boycotting animal products, destructive industries. But there's only so far that you can take these things. It's about doing what is practicable, excluding something as far as is practicably possible. And in terms of boycotting a organization that's led by a Zionist, that's a very easy thing to do. A very, very easy thing to do. A festival by a Zionist, very easy thing to do, to boycott that. It's doesn't take anything away from me to not go to Earthbeat.
It's even easier for us to not go than to go.
We'd rather not drive. We'd rather not spend the gas to get there. And there are other ways for us to send out our message. So in terms of us boycotting, it's very easy to do that. But in terms of Facebook and Meta in general, there is no equivalent social media platforms where our people congregate for the dissemination of that type of information. It's like, you know, we want to boycott fossil fuels. But we're all stuck into a system that is reliant on roads and fossil-fueled modes of transport. That is the current system that's been imposed on all of us. So until we work our way out of that system for a greener, more positive alternative, like you say, you can't be anti-capitalist and still use tools of capitalism. You have to use those stepping stones to get to the other side. There is no alternative that we could switch to in terms of an alternative for to Meta. So, that's our position on it. You boycott things as far as is practicably possible within your means.
Yeah, and this is an interesting conflation going on there, because Meta, these monopolies of social media, are not comparable to a festival that's organized by predominantly 3 co-founders and their crew. They kind of conflate these and make out like their festival is out of anyone's control, in the same way that Meta is out of anyone's control. But their festival is entirely within their control, and they did make changes. And that's not comparable to Meta, which is out of all of our direct control. We do speak out against Zionism on Meta all the time. But for the festival, these people writing these comments directly are able to change the situation. So they're just not two comparable things, the festival and Meta.
No, and it's like they're putting their festival on that level with these unavoidable, like they're putting Earthbeat on the same level, the same hierarchy as like petrol and phones, essentially.
But it's actually very easy to avoid. Yeah, so it's really awesome that people within the Earthbeat community have led to these changes, and I think they're going to continue doing that, because a lot of people within that community didn't like that Isaac had said that. A lot of contributors to Earthbeat don't support that whakaaro, and so you can see that they're on this journey, and I'm really glad that they are, and I'm really stoked for this positive change that's happened, not just because of us, but because of our community and everyone in Earthbeat who spoke up and made the change happen. So that's great. Our little win for the week is that we've deplatformed a Zionist from a little event.
Well done, everyone. Well done.
Well done.
If you liked, if you shared the post, if you put thoughtful comments, if you put any of that energy, if you sent out any karakia, if you did anything, good job, because looks like it gave those at Earthbeat what they needed to make some of these changes. So, and again, mihi atu kia koutou, everyone at Earthbeat who had something to do with those changes. Massive appreciation. We've never been to Earthbeat, but like all festivals, it's kind of one of those things, the more we look into it, like sadly to say, the more problematic it seems to be. The more I look into Earthbeat, the more I've been questioning a lot of stuff, including what they said in terms of partnering with Ngāti Whātua. They haven't been updating their website as efficiently as they should be to give people accurate information. And as well, they said, for example, that we blocked them, which we never did. So they're trying to make it out that we are some type of like censorship group, some type of anti-free speech group. The interactions that I had on the phone and an email.
And I should mention that they had an Earthbeat Israel. They ran a concurrent Earthbeat festival in Israel, also associated with the same Zionist, Isaac Oren. So I don't think that festival is still ongoing in Israel, but it's just interesting that they had this festival in New Zealand and in Israel, and that they have this co-founder who also seemingly has relationships with some very extremist Zionists in New Zealand. So there's a lot of red flags there, especially with him.
Since we're looking at the red flags, someone commented on one of the Earthbeat posts, and we looked into them. They run festivals in Israel, somewhere over there, and they call themselves Māori Productions, and they use the Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori logo as their main logo, and they call themselves Māori Productions without the macron on the A. And just co-opting our culture to sell their festival, and they called it like a psychedelic kind of experience. Experience the Maori shaman psychedelic experience. So not only co-opting our culture, but using it in association with, and I'm not against psychedelics, but using it in association with, it sounded like he's promoting a drug-fueled festival. And so
it's very strange.
I was trying to be nice to Earthbeat and my little mihi and say, appreciate y'all for making these changes. And I just wanted to highlight that stuff to say, like, all festivals are pretty colorful and run by interesting individuals. And if you look deeply into any festival and the people who are running them, you're probably going to find problematic people. So I'm not trying to say that Earthbeat is a standout in terms of being good or being bad. Just a mihi to you who believe in festivals, and this one in particular for making those positive changes. And
I love festivals, but unfortunately, they're often cesspits for toxic people. And why?
Right.
It's just like the normal tools of cults, right? Whenever you have, values of love and light and unity, it's easy for someone to co-opt those values, say that they personally offer those, and in order to get in those spaces and to exploit vulnerable people. And that's my experience with festivals in New Zealand, is that it's often a hub for, and I don't know anything about Earthbeat in this sense because we've never been, but for other festivals in New Zealand, it's often been a hub for predators and people who use drug to put people under the influence and sexually or otherwise exploit them. And I think it's just that kind of space. It's just easier for predators to go and prey on people because people are in an open mindset, they're in a trusting mindset, you're speaking all the right things about love and light and values. And often organizers of these festivals don't clamp down on this behavior. When we made this post, we received private messages from women talking about their horrible experiences at other festivals. So I do think this is a topic that we should talk about in depth another day, because really it's a massive problem in society, and it doesn't get much coverage as well because it's the sort of thing where if you speak out about those social dynamics, you get ostracized and you get attacked for it socially. So it gets swept under the rug often, the issues of these festivals and the abuse that occurs to them.
Yeah. And I love the idea of us all being one. The Earthbeat kind of slogan, or the things that they talk about, one beat, one heart, one love. When I think about it, it kind of sounds a bit similar to the ACT Party narrative of one man, one law, one
all
flag.
Lives matter.
It's similar to the All Lives Matter kind of narrative. People will remember it when Black Lives Matter started coming out. The anti to the Black Lives Matter was people using the phrase All Lives Matter. And the idea from the All Lives Matter people is that, no, we're all equal, we're all the same. We all have one heart, one beat, one man, one vote, one flag, one language, one land, only one. Like it escalates. It's this idea that we are all the same, that we can just level everything out and we can all just be the same because deep down we're all just human beings. We all fuck a papa back to Africa. But that is the reality. But what it encourages us to do is to just see what we have in common and to forget about everything else. And when you forget about everything else, you're forgetting about all of the layers and complexities that we all have that does change our social standing, changes our resources, it changes our ability to do things. It levels everything out and says that every perspective is the same, which is why they were happy to platform extremist Zionist views, because they're like, oh, hey, it's all right, you're going to have some Palestine views there as well. But not all views are equal. And sure, you're entitled to have those views, but like we've been saying, you don't necessarily need to encourage those views to be at the center of the decision-making table in terms of an experience that everyone else is going to have. Not all perspectives and opinions have the same impact, right? If you have an extremely Zionist, offensive, racist viewpoint, people are going to be hurt by those opinions and those perspectives. There's difference.
Yeah. And many people pointed this out in the comments, but I do not believe they would ever in a million years have allowed this person to continue organizing with them and to platform them and give them the opportunity to have a film at the festival if their views that they had were that extreme, but against, for example, Jewish people.
Right, yeah.
If he was as Islamophobic as he is currently, but actually anti-Semitic, they would not be associating with them. So this does speak about the wider culture of the normalization of Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiments in New Zealand. And I don't know why we have that normalization, given that our biggest terrorist attack was against Muslims by a white supremacist. And actually this whole thing was happening around the commemorations of March 15th. And yeah, this is definitely a massive issue in New Zealand. It's definitely normal. And, you know, just even him feeling like he can just go out and say that with his business account and just continue society as normal. It's the same way that other extreme Zionists like Juliet Moses is able to say really extreme, hateful things online, but just continue in her normal circle and her normal life and getting media interviews all the time. So, yeah, there's a wider issue that has enabled this issue. So they're right, the Earthbeat people, in saying they are a microcosm of wider society. It is absolutely true. But we are against the normal things that happen in wider society.
Yeah, I mean, festivals are meant to be about creating an alternative society and
That's better.
being a model of an alternative society. That is better. So when we do create these spaces, think about the alternative societies that we want to create, and let's see that as an example and try and move towards that. But yeah, how is it a better society when you are centering those really harmful extremist views?
Yeah, it's not, and I'm an Arab. So it was hilarious. Going on his LinkedIn, he's like, I hate Arabs, you know, I hope they all die, you know, basically. He's talking about me. So he hates me, you know, and it's like, of course I'm not going to go to his festival.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Like if someone was insulting me or insulting Māori in that way, why are you even expecting that I should give you an excuse for why I'm not coming? You know, it's absolutely insane. Anyway, I think that's it.
Good outcome in the end. Good outcome in the end.
Yeah, good outcome.
So we are happy.
And, you know, I am sorry to all of the Earthbeat people in terms of throwing shade on Earthbeat.
Right before the festival.
Right before the festival, you know, at the end of the day, it was our lack of due diligence for why this happened. But like you say, I think there was a positive outcome. But, yeah, no, just again, mihi to those people who are there. Just keep it up. You've got a lot of work to do, I guess is what we've been saying, because the problem here is not as simple as what has been aired in the public. There is a lot going on there. So if you're sticking with it, good on you. I hope there is kia kaha. I hope there's a good outcome. And we wouldn't be against potentially coming to Earthbeat in the future if there are changes that have been made. But as well, I think, and a lot of other people have said this, the changes need to be transparent. You can't just say, oh, we're going to take off his film and then like leave it at that. Processes and policies need to be put in place. Identify the mistake here, identify the issue, and then put a policy in place to ensure that it's not going to happen again and that there's a pathway out of it to make the event safer and the attendees safer. Not just the public, but those who are coming to speak. Like, you could have told us beforehand that you had a Zionist at the core of your festival pulling the strings. You know, we're a pro-Palestine group. We put out decolonial content on the regular. Should have been obvious that it would have been offensive to us that he is such a core central part of the festival. So maybe a heads up in that sense could have been helpful to avoid this situation as well.
And they have in the past told panelists that Isaac is one of the co-founders and that he has those views. So I think that was part of the issue as well, because if we were invited and they were just open about the kind of organization that they have and Isaac's contributions, we would have known and made an educated decision. It might have been like, yes, sure, we'll come and challenge those views in a debate. Who knows? But we didn't know, and so
that was not what we thought we were signing up to.
Mhm.
So, yeah, potentially a debate or a discussion they would like to have in the future. But this is where we are now. Not the best way for us to get to where we are now in terms of with Earthbeat, but I think it's been a positive outcome. And just thank you again to those who are there. And
I really, really did feel bad that it all happened around the time of the festival. And
when we had this phone call and it ended poorly and Samah felt terribly, I hung up because I was like, I ain't going to listen to this shit. I'm going to hang up. I said to the guy, I'm like, please, can we just end this conversation while we are able to end it respectfully before something else gets said. I hung up. We said goodbye first. I didn't just hung up on the dude. And Samah felt terrible. She's like, please, can you call him back and apologize?
well, what he said was really, really rude and really inappropriate. Definitely.
And we're not going to say what he said because we already promised to the organizers that we weren't going to repeat it. So, sorry. We did. So now we're never allowed to share that story. But yeah, it doesn't need to be repeated. I think they have their logic. And with me, he created a hypothetical where he took that logic to the very extreme. And that's what you do with hypotheticals to try and tease out these types of things. But I was extremely offended by it. Again, just good luck to everybody at Earthbeat. You got a lot of work to do, but it's not unresolvable, right? And we agree with Earthbeat in that sense of these conversations do need to be had. Like, how do we address these big things in our society if we don't have these conversations? But you got to moderate those conversations properly. You got to have guidelines. You got to do something. You got to do something. If you just leave it all out there, that's when chaos really happens. These things need to be managed properly. So put policies in place. Get people together who have mediated these types of things before and get advice from them in terms of how to make your organization, your festival safer into the future. Ka pai. I think we'll leave it at that. Yeah, we haven't got any more kaupapa.
We actually do, but we don't have time to do it.
Okay,
so it's
yes.
fine. Might have to do it another time.
Okay, yeah, ka pai. It's already too late.
Wanted to talk about the police and state violence because just recently
of course.
They've killed a number of people. They've hospitalized a number of people.
Let's just go through it quickly because I don't want it to get left out and I don't want to have to push this into like another episode. Oh, you closed our nicely organized tabs. Oh, no, they're there. So just really quickly, we will try to be as quick as possible with this ihuama. So the first one I'll bring up, like if you go to jail, right, you need Annette Sykes as your support person. She's been assisting a kaumatua who was breaking his parole conditions. Okay, so he was meant to be staying at a particular address, but instead he was sleeping with his 2 cats in his car. And so he got taken into custody. And while the police were, doing his paperwork there and then moving him to his cell, this kaumatua, 70-year-old kaumatua, he refused to go into his cell, and they beat him up. They beat the shit out of him. And there's photos. Annette Sykes has put through OIAs to get the footage to definitively say what has happened. But it's just an example of how our state corrections facilities are just not up to scratch. So this is Dean Wycliffe. Sorry, I'm terrible with names.
Wycliffe.
But he's currently on a hunger strike, and he's an old guy. He's been visited by Steve Abel from the Greens. I think Rawiri Waititi was scheduled to see him today. Tameiti went in and saw him today. So he's a much loved individual. I don't think we really need to say anything in terms of promoting the campaign to help him because he's just got such a big amount of support thanks to everyone that's been going, these high-profile, amazing rangatira who have been putting themselves out there to support Dean, because this has been a terrible example of, from what it looks like, unjustified police brutality for something that's it's just totally unnecessary. He has been to prison before for very serious charges, and he has served a life sentence. He has served his time. He's done his time. He's done a hell of a lot of time. He's done a life sentence in prison.
And he arrested him purely for being in his car and not the designated residence. That's it.
Yeah. And my understanding is his parole hearing is coming up in April 5th. But he's going on hunger strike currently. He wants to be released, and he's wasting away in prison. Those people who are currently watching him are fearful that he's not going to make it to his parole hearing. And when he was interviewed by Steve Abel, he said to Steve a lot of stuff, but he said essentially that he's prepared to die. He's prepared to make a point here. And one of the points that he wants to make is that those who are in, what is it called? They call it Peru, funnily enough. It's the, what is it? I don't have the link for it. It's the most maximum security prisons that we have here in Aotearoa. The highest maximum security prison that we have here in Aotearoa, and they do solitary confinement. And this is a place, oh, here we go, yeah. Prisoners of Extreme Risk Unit. It was created after the Christchurch shooting, but it's been implemented now as a permanent thing. And it's where you know, those who are most struggling in our society, those who have committed the worst crimes, it's where they go. And there are extreme cases of social deprivation that takes place in this prison. And Dean's wish, if he dies, is for more light to be shined on this prison. Where one of the lawyers who represents several people in this prison has said that by international law, by standards, when it comes to social deprivation, people shouldn't be socially deprived for more than 22 hours of a day, I believe it is. Don't quote me on the specifics, but she is saying that in this prison, people are being socially deprived more than what international law dictates. There are many, many individuals in these cells who are being socially deprived to a point that is just incomprehensible, unjustifiable, and of course are in no way at all going to be helping these people on any type of road to recovery. No. And the people who are in there as well talk about how confusing and how difficult the prison's system is in terms of telling its own inmates what their sentences are, how long they're going to be in there for. They don't communicate. And it creates confusion. It creates difficulty for the inmates to understand their own sentences. And so that's Dean's legacy in terms of what he would like us to learn about if things go the way that hopefully they do not. But maybe we'll do more pieces on that. I mean, we're prison abolitionists. We believe that we're not going to fix our people, fix our society by locking them away in dungeons and just letting them rot in there, you know. And we're building bigger prisons to do more of that because we don't want to fix these core issues in our society. You know, just build bigger prisons, just chuck them all in there. There's a better way. There's a better way. We don't know exactly what it is, but we need to be exploring those ways. We need to be not just doubling down and throwing all of our eggs in this basket of locking people away. We need to be working on other forms of restorative measures of justice. It's just, yeah, it's outrageous. So we've got Dean, who's Annette is looking after him. She's doing an amazing job. Another one, people might have heard about a man with a samurai sword. That's how it was portrayed in the media, that there's a man running around with a samurai sword. Turns out it was just a metal pipe, but police reported it, and then I think the media re-reported it. Perhaps the media was misreporting the police's words, I'm not sure. But, you know, they said it's a samurai sword, so of course everyone's scared, everyone's freaking out. Oh no, this man with a samurai sword's going to chop us up. So he was in his car with his mate. They got pulled over by the police.
For
I believe
speeding or?
Oh, I'm not sure why the police were chasing them.
Okay.
These men who were detained, apprehended, abducted, they do have a criminal history, and I do believe at the time, police.
They're trying to get them.
They're trying to get them. They're trying to get.
I think it was the burglary.
This one?
This one, yeah.
Possibly, but end of the day,
doesn't matter.
End of the day, they didn't crash. They pulled him over, and they tasered this man. I will play the video. It's not Well, we are talking about a dead person here, so I mean, it's pretty morbid. But here's the video. They taser him, he goes to the ground, and then they decide to put the dog on him. They decide to kick him. Oh, please don't play an ad. Oh my god. I'm muting it. I'm covering the screen so we don't advertise for them. No. This is why you download the video, and then you can play it independently. You don't have to worry about the ads. Aroha mai. Okay, we don't have audio. Kapai. So we've just seen him go to the ground. That's after he's been tased. And now they decide to go around him with the dog, with the police dog.
Terrorism.
What's going on there? And see here, I'm just going to pause it because it's about to end. You can see the dog is on the man, and you can see the police officer on the far left kicking this man while he's down. And my understanding is that a police officer was bit, and that's why there was that little altercation of the kicking and whatnot. But, you know, that's the police's fault. That's the police's fault. They've tasered this man. It's then their job to safely do whatever the hell it is that they want to do with him. You know, all of this drama has then happened. After this man was then taken by police and put in custody, he later passed away.
They murdered him. I mean, that's just straight up murder. How come when the state kills people, it's not considered murder?
Yeah.
Why would you need that many people and a dog to apprehend someone who's clearly having a time? Because the thing is that
we need to be de-escalating in these situations.
Absolutely.
And as soon as the man hits the floor, as soon as he hits the floor, the police officer starts walking closer to him with the police dog.
Yeah.
For me, I would freak out. My heart would be racing in that situation. I don't know, you know, I'm sure there will be the coroner's report and things like that, but you can imagine how much stress that would add to the situation. So I completely agree with you. These police, I mean,
there was a
manslaughter at the very least, you know?
There was a report that looked into years of police camera evidence and really detailed incident reports on all of it. And they found that not only were they not de-escalating situations like this, sometimes they were deliberately aggravating it. There was one time they went to someone's house who was mentally unstable. They were having an episode, and the police decided to antagonize this man. He was a Māori man, by saying to him, "You're not even indigenous. Māori are not even indigenous." For some reason, decided to verbally harass this guy with racist stuff. The cop did.
That's out of it.
And as you can imagine, this escalated that man's response, which ended up resulting in the police assaulting him. So they aggravate the situation even worse, and then they assault them when they don't respond. In this case, and ended up murdering this man. And their family are pushing for justice. They have just lost someone in the most horrific way possible. But it's, you know, I'll let you continue with the story, but the state acts like it has a monopoly on violence. They're allowed to commit as many acts of horrific violence on our people. We are never allowed to respond, and their violence is never to be condemned or seen as something that's negative.
Killed it. No, that says it all. Just that this man who sadly passed away, and mihi atu ki te whānau pani, aroha atu ki a koutou. His name was Pere Samah Matue, or Sam Matue. So, kia ora rau atu ki a koe. His family have a GoFundMe. This is the one, a GoFundMe. They sent his body back to Australia because he's a 501, this individual, which is a whole nother story in terms of the lack of care that we provide to, you know, our most disenfranchised members of society. You know, he was born here in Aotearoa, but they moved to Australia when he was very young. He spent majority of his life over there. He got engaged with the wrong crowds over there. Australia made the decision to deport him here back to Aotearoa. And, you know, with those deportations that Australia does with those 501s, they just dump them back over here. No real solid plans of support systems for reintegration back into society. Just dumped here.
They have no family, no connections, no friends. And now New Zealand police have murdered him.
So yeah, taking Sam home on GoFundMe if you want to support them. They've already had the tangi, but they have a goal on this website for 80%. They've reached 80% of their goal. So if you want to help them to cover additional costs that they would have had to front in terms of the funeral and all of those things, go hard. Another thing that we should talk about just briefly. Dave Latelli has decided to front or support a petition that is asking for police accountability. Oh, Aroha, I didn't even show the GoFundMe. They've reached $6,429, pretty good. But yeah, give to the fund me if you want to support this whānau. Just search Taking Sam Home on GoFundMe. Killed it. Dave Latelli has fronted a petition demanding accountability for police actions and mandatory police body cameras. So very much support the first part of this, demand accountability for police actions. I think that should be the main ask of this petition, personally, and I'm not like, I'm just giving my opinion here. I think that should be the main ask of the petition. A demand for accountability and for something to be put in place that helps us get accountability. But then saying that the body cams should be the tool that is then implemented to get that accountability, I'm not so sure of.
Yeah, that's just further funding into the police infrastructure, right?
Yeah, it's just giving more money to the police. When we need to be looking at alternatives. Like why is crime happening in the first place? But of course, that's a bit much for a petition ask. But do body cameras actually help? I've seen no meta-analysis, no conclusive collections of studies that show us that wearing body cameras actually reduces police violence.
So in the United States, where they have more data on this, it has not reduced police violence. Research shows that, if anything, police use the footage in ways that benefit them in their court cases. They'll use the sections that work for their arguments. They will direct their cameras in a certain direction to make things look negative in a certain way. There's a lot of things outside of our control that they will use. And what they've found is, in the United States, that it's actually police and police-affiliated industries that have been pushing for cameras on police, because it has been benefiting them in so many court cases.
Oh, and and it goes into the whole, Israeli spy technology and things like that. Who sells the police industries the camera equipment?
That was a big part of the research that I read, is that they were looking at the companies that were profiting, and that they were actually the ones pushing this body cams on police. How do we get evidence? Well, someone asks in the comments, because I used to think that body cams works and that it was a good idea for police until I saw this evidence from the United States. And the way that we fix this issue is more at the institutional level. So what we've got is a culture that enables violence. They're allowed to take police dogs with them. They're allowed to take tasers with them, So it's about eliminating those, the policies of the police to eliminate them being able to do that in the first place. It's about changing our whole mentality about what the limits of police and the ability and the powers that they have over our people. The fact that we're just okay as a society with a whole gang of police, attacking someone, pushing them on the ground. Sometimes they smash their heads on the ground, on the concrete when they want to arrest them. Setting dogs and tasering people who are often having mental health episodes. That's the underlying conversation that needs to be had, because otherwise the violence will continue to be had. And all of the underlying issues that cause people to have those mental health issues to begin with, the poverty, the inequality, the dispossession, the colonization, the deportations of the 501s, those are the things that we need to work on when it means reducing police violence. And actually, it's about shifting resources away from police into those other grassroots organizations that are going to help people on the ground. But whereas police cameras just continues to put money, to put resources into the police state, and will only further entrench and grow the police state.
And also, you know, like imagine like body cameras for, I mean, it's the, how do we have an organization, like, how do we make sure those who are watching the footage are going to do good in their roles? You know, so it's about changing the whole system. How do we have those who are in those power positions with the police so that they use these tools properly? Because, you know, I could just be like, oh, stop resisting, she's resisting, you know what I mean?
There is evidence of them doing that, by the way.
You know, they can cover the camera and then speak, and the audio is captured, and then that can be used as evidence. But, you know, hey, go and sign this petition if you believe in that kaupapa. Not saying you shouldn't sign the petition, just trying to say we need to be wary when we further resource our already failing institutions without the proper safety guards to ensure that those tools are used properly. Like the bro is saying, potent perspective. I don't trust the police either, bruh. That's why I don't trust simply giving them a tool and then trusting they're going to use the tool ethically or responsibly. A lot of these studies that have been done looking at the effectiveness of body cams talk about the lack of policy and things like that in place, so that you can't, like, there's nothing stopping them from, you know, covering the camera or turning it off and things like that. There has to be an ethical police system to be able to implement those policies. And like what Shane Jones is currently talking about with putting cameras on fishing boats. He doesn't want it to be accessible to the public. He just wants the industry to manage their own footage. And so, you know, if it's possible that it's going to be implemented in that way for the fishing industry, cameras on fishing boats, and only the industry policing their own footage, then it is possible that that is the route we're going to go down with our police. So I am on the fence, to say the best, in terms of if I support body cameras on police, but I think an important aspect that needs to be at the center of that, if that is a strategy that we go down, is for us to ensure that there are safeguards in place so that those tools are used responsibly. But also to simply ask or demand for accountability, and then to let those independent bodies who understand the issues of body cams and police brutality, you know, victim advocates and things like that, people who have been on the other side of police brutality and things like that. What do those expert groups want instead of us coming at them with a desired outcome of how we achieve police accountability?
Because this is kind of a popular go-to. We just need a camera so we can see it and then we can deal with it.
Yeah, like,
it's
how about we just put cameras in Palestine?
Yeah,
and then maybe Israel will stop.
That's actually a really great comparison. We have all this evidence and daily broadcast of genocide in Palestine, and it's not stopping it. It's about the willpower of the state to stop these issues. And that's what I'm trying to say with what do we do? Instead, it's about changing our government so that they're reducing the funding in police and prison and putting it into our grassroots. That is the only way to reduce police and prison violence. Because if the colonial state is supporting those actions, it doesn't matter if there's video of it, it will not be prosecuted. So it's a very easy to ask for body cams. It seems like the obvious logical thing, but I completely agree with you. We should be going to experts who have studied this and who know what the best pathway is to reducing police violence. And it's basically what Black Lives Matter said: defund the police. It sounds silly, but that's actually what we need to do. Defund the police, fund mental health support. It's, you know, and that's, and the same with prison. And, you know, we did have one other example, actually, which was the police car chase. And I just want to say it's a similar thing in the sense of the data says that car chases increase the likelihood of violence in the same way that cops having weapons on them increases the likelihood of violence in the same way that them having tasers and dogs and so on. All of this evidence is available to us, but this government came in and actually enabled police chasing, or are in the process of enabling police to greater powers to do chases. So they chased someone because they were speeding, the silliest reason in the world to chase someone, and then they ended up crashing into and killing someone. So they've ended up, because of the police's actions, someone's dead and the other person, their life is ruined because they're going to go to prison for reckless driving and killing someone. And so, again, we have evidence that says police chasing people causes more harm than good, but because they're going with this tough on crime narrative, they are going to justify greater powers to police without ever being pushed sufficiently by our media to prove that there's evidence for these initiatives.
Killed it. And the final one that we're going to bring up, if people are on Facebook, they've probably seen this post by Blossom Heta. And she talks about her son, 15 years old. They admitted that they were doing something wrong. This 15-year-old boy and his friends were taken into police custody. And then while they were in custody, Blossom Heta, the mother of this rangatahi, she says that his face was smashed against the ground 3 times, his head pulled back while on the ground with police officer on his back and pepper sprayed. Officer then put his shin against his face while it was against the ground with so much force it broke his jaw. And she goes on to say that her son was ignored and it required a shift change for then the next officer on guard to admit that there was something wrong, and then for that child to then get medical attention. And that was after 3 hours. And this boy ended up having to have 2 metal plates put into his mouth. And so there's just failure all around the show. And you know, people might say to us, well, the only way that we're going to see what happened there for real is the cameras in the police shop. And as well, you know, for what happened with Dean, the only way we're going to get to the bottom of his incident as well is with those OIAs that Annette has requested to see that footage as well. So footage is really important. Cameras are really important to understand the truth of what's going on. And perhaps this is one of those times where we're so deep in our problems that we are going to have to accept some imperfect solutions to get to the solution.
Yeah, but the evidence shows that it doesn't reduce police violence, and the evidence is the evidence. And you know, someone has said, you know, very wisely, that independent bodies would have to be outside of the reach of political and financial manipulation. But the whole thing is that
that's the goal for all of our institutions. That's the goal.
Absolutely.
But achieving that is just, I mean, we can dream. It's the goal, right? But,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, just that's the whole thing, is that the colony is not willing to do that to itself, in the same way that they're not willing to move away from a system where police violence is normalized. Those things go together. If they were really willing to reduce police violence, then they would take those steps. But because they're not, they're also not going to set up independent bodies that would be outside the reach of political and financial manipulation. So it's simply that they would not allow such a body to exist. And we need to understand that about the colonial state and factor that when we do push for certain measures. So, you know, and I think, you know, a similar thing could be made with the fishing boats. Not to bring on a new subject, but if you take something like trawling, for example, it is inherently destructive. We don't actually need a camera to tell us, oh, 2 extra dolphins got killed that time, because the whole thing is just bad, you know? And so it's like the police and prison. The whole thing is bad. It's rotten to the core. If we add a camera to the equation, it's not going to change it. And that's why we're abolitionists. It's exactly the same with the peacekeepers. And that's why we're abolitionists when it comes with war, when it comes to police, when it comes to prison, not in these welfarist halfway measures that end up just perpetuating the harm in the long term.
Kia ora. Kia ora. Very good. Very good. Is that us? I think that's us.
That's us.
E te iwi. Thank y'all so much. Have been enjoying some of the back and forth in the comment section. We're going to have disagreements here and there, e hoa ma, but disagreements is all good. It's how we grow. And we like to share opinions and learn from people who leave comments and things like that. So no mai ngā wero. Bring it on. We're always keen for the kōrero. And we always appreciate it. And I hope the people who have had disagreements with that y'all appreciate a little bit of disagreement here and there. And yeah, just thanks to everyone for coming tonight. Hopefully y'all enjoyed the stream. And hopefully you have a lovely rest of your Friday evening. Any concluding thoughts, Samah?
Oh, just thanks again for everyone who showed up. I enjoyed all of the conversations tonight. I'm keen to talk more about this conversation. Maybe we'll bring up the research about the police cameras in the United States in the future. But I'm really interested in talking more about this topic. How do we tackle the police and prison industrial complex in practical, meaningful ways?
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Potent perspective.
What do we do now? What is going to do something now? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we're interested in exploring those things because we think that there are some pathways that can be explored. Some iwi groups, some marae groups that are looking down some really interesting pathways, moving people into their programs rather than sending them into prison, which gets them on that, destructive pathway of the prison system of then reoffending and rah. How do we get in between that and stop those reoffendings from happening? Things like that. There are pathways that are being explored and I think they look exciting. But yeah, maybe we'll talk about that in another episode.
Can't buy, yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed having more of an interactive experience this time and having a bit more back and forth with the comments. I really like that.
Yeah, we need to do it more often. Okay. Mō ora, e hoa ma. Have a good rest of your night.